Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Dear guests, please be seated. The conference is beginning. I would like to invite the Program Director of the European Policy Center, Belgrade, and WeBER 2.0 Project Team Leader, Milena Lazarevic, to open the conference with a welcome note.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and colleagues, I would like to welcome you to the third Regional Citizens First Conference of the WeBER initiative. Citizens First Conference series aims to enhance and broaden the dialogue on creating and implementing inclusive and transparent public administration reform policies that meet citizens' needs. We believe that for the governments to be motivated to change, it is necessary to increase the bottom-up demand for better administration in the Western Balkan region. This, in turn, we believe will contribute to the sustainability of these administrative reforms to the benefit of the citizens, but also to the benefit of our country's EU accession process and future EU membership. This year, the conference's leitmotif is bringing administration closer to citizens using citizen consultations, which have been implemented at the local level across the region, using EU good practice in implementing European citizen consultations. Our intention is to relay and discuss citizens' experiences with the administrations in the region, their concerns, suggestions, as well as praises, and thus lead the discussions towards expert recommendations for decision makers to improve the services that their institutions provide to citizens. In short, we are trying to speak with citizens' voices to the administrations of the region. The WeBER research team will, as in the previous conferences, which took place in September 2018 and February 2021, present the brand new PAR monitor results for 2021-2022. They will compare progress made since the previous cycles with reflections on how to overcome reform challenges and grasp the benefits of a citizen-friendly approach to the public administration reforms. The discussions of the results, let's say in-depth discussions on the results, which will take place in the breakout sessions this afternoon after lunch, will be followed by the finalization of the monitoring results and production of the PAR monitor reports, 1 regional comparative report and 6 national reports, which will be presented in spring, so stay tuned for that. I would, of course, like to thank our donors. The WeBER 2.0 project is principally funded by the European Union, with the co-financing for the organization of this conference provided by the Royal Norwegian Embassy in Belgrade as part of the larger Norwegian effort to support civil society, and the Balkan Trust for Democracy of the German Marshall Fund of the US. And for the end, I would just like to make a couple of technical remarks. By scanning the QR code, which you will find on the back of your name tag, you can easily access the conference program, the speakers' bios, as well as the registration link for breakout sessions, which will remain open until noon. The working language of the conference is English, but don't be confused. You will see some headphones because we will have translation between local languages and English for the specific breakout sessions where some of the speakers will address you in their local language. So that will be only specific to a couple of sessions. The rest of the program is completely in English, and we do not provide interpretation between local languages, so just to be clear on that. With this, I would like to close my opening speech and wish you and all of us great 2 working days.
Mr. Admirim Aliti, the Minister of Information Society and Administration of North Macedonia, will now deliver his keynote speech.
Dear organizers, dear Milena, dear Director Popovsky, distinguished guests, representatives from the EU Commission and the EU delegation, representatives from EU member states, Sigma, Director of RESPA, Maya, representatives from all Western Balkan countries, representatives from civil society organizations, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to be here today as a representative of the government of North Macedonia. Allow me to first and foremost express my most sincere gratitude and appreciation to all of you who participated in the organization of this conference. The modernization and improvement of the state and public administration are constantly in the focus and are considered to be the basis of the entire public sector on which the processes and development in every democratic society depend on. We are aware of the importance of public administration reform, which, according to the new methodology for accession negotiations, for the first time is specifically defined as an area that is covered by the process and is part of the first cluster, basics, which is of crucial importance for the dynamics of the negotiations as a whole. Of course, modern administration, digitized services, the Citizen First is one of the pillars of the work program of the government of the Republic of North Macedonia for 2022-2024. In that direction, our government has strong political commitment to the public administration reform process by adopting and implementing the public administration reform strategy with an action plan from 2018-2022. Our government remains committed to reform process in the area of public administration, as it is in the process of preparing a new 8-year strategic document for public administration reform 2023-2030, which is in line of our aspirations as a country to be a full member of the EU by 2030. In the context of creating an efficient, modern and service-oriented public administration, it's our obligation to contribute to the improvement of the conditions for smooth communication with civil actors and the development of civil society, in which the creation of policies is an inclusive manner through respect for the views of citizens and in cooperation with civil society organizations in key sectoral reforms, will be considered a standard, a norm, not a derogation, all in order to ensure sustainable policies in the interest of citizens. Thus, for example, the single national electronic register of regulations, which we have in North Macedonia, and its name is ENER, is an electronic system. It contains existing regulations, draft laws of the ministries in the preparation stage, and the report from the conducted regulatory impact assessment, RIA. Namely, ENER is a tool primarily intended for electronic information of citizens, as well as representatives from non-governmental organizations, chambers of commerce, legal entities, government representatives, as well as separate ministries. Precisely through the regulatory impact assessment process, which implies implementation of appropriate and time-coordinated consultations with the public, ENER provides possibility for submitting proposals, opinions and remarks, allowing stakeholders to get involved in the creation of regulations and the opportunity for citizens to contribute to this process. This allows achievement of greater predictability of the same and, of course, transparency of the entire process. What my government stands for is having an effective e-government, and I suppose most of Western Balkan countries should stand for it, that will provide a wide range of benefits, including greater efficiency and budget savings, increased transparency and greater participation by the citizens and the business community in the policy-making processes. In this direction, the government advocates that the public administration provides digital services as a mandatory option. In these reform trends, the increasing importance of digital technologies, where citizens have a central place in the design and provision of administrative services, cannot be overlooked. Having regard to this, our reform plans reflect our will and ability to accept the changes of the new era. Namely, the commitment to the digitization process is evident through several annual projects aimed at facilitating the business community operation. One of the planned measures is the connection of registers in order to facilitate services to citizens and businesses. Through the registry offices for opening of new businesses, an opening of a new company in the central registry takes about half an hour, which is connected to the public revenue office where a tax number is generated. A central registry for the opening of a new company submits reports to KIPS, which is a company, where the single register of transaction is maintained, generating a transaction account linked to a company manager. The central registry checks the real owners based on the data in the central population registry system, which is maintained in our ministry. International awards were also received for this project. The administration is a service to the citizens, and the opinion of the citizens is important in improving the quality of the services. That's why we have created a system in the one point of services, which is scattered in most of the cities in North Macedonia, that allows every citizen to rate our services. By scanning a QR code, the citizen accesses an electronic questionnaire, and the results provided by all citizens are open to the public. With this, we ensure complete transparency and monitoring of the process in improving the quality of services. We are working on establishing a unified system for electronic documents management in all institutions at state and central level. We expect that this system will allow institutions to communicate more easily, thus replacing paper and physical stamps with digital documents and electronic stamps. And citizens will receive services from the administration significantly faster. During the next 2 years, we plan to establish a mobile application through which the citizens will also be able to be identified by connecting to the central population register system, whereupon downloading the correct data about the citizens. This, we hope, will eliminate all errors in citizens' data, which will directly affect the top quality of our services. We know that we will require, this process requires public campaigns, educational workshops, and promotions, and we are hoping to be able to implement more projects in this area through our membership in Digital Europe program, beginning from January 2023. Coherent institutional support of the digitization process is expected to be provided with the establishment of the digital agency. Namely, the digital agency will be the main driver of the state's processes towards a digital society and towards an administration that will maintain the main systems which will contribute to a stable digital environment. For these reasons, with my participation in this conference, I would like to emphasize the importance of the public administration reform process and the participation of the civil sector in the policy-making process. In doing so, I would use this opportunity to encourage all stakeholders in the public administration reform process to actively use all the institutional consultative mechanisms for consultation and cooperation that are available with the institutions of the executive power, the donor community, and other interested parties in a way that will undoubtedly influence and contribute to the advancement of key sector reforms and the advancement of the potential of our society as a whole. Our efforts over the past years have led to the improvement of efficiency, transparency, and easily accessible public administration. But of course, we still have to work on improving some of the areas where international and regional reports have noted that we need to improve. The government remains committed to the process and an active supporter and partner of civil society, open to cooperation with all stakeholders both now and in the future. Finally, allow me to reiterate our commitment to the public administration reform and express our gratitude to the continuous support and assistance the European Union has provided us. I would like to assure you that we are ready to continue our cooperation in the future as well. Thank you. Hvala.
The keynote address of Mr. Maciej Popovski, the acting Director General of the Directorate General for Neighborhood and Enlargement Negotiations, will follow shortly. Mr. Popovski, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning. The Minister, dear Milena, thank you for having me. This is certainly an important event, and I'm glad I can participate. The topic, it is something we are not dealing with every day, but it is with us all the time. Because as you rightly remarked, this is part of our fundamental first approach. So today I would like to share three main points. First, the context of the public administration reform as a fundamental for democracy and the accession process. Second, the citizens first approach, which is key for everything that we are doing. And third, I'll focus on some developments that can contribute to creating a better public administration. And let me start with the values, because the values are central. And I think today we see it even more than before because of the Russian war and the confrontation between our values and values that we don't share. So democracy, equality, the rule of law, respect for human rights are key values under the EU treaties, and we'll continue standing by them. That provides a good guidance for delivering citizens first. And it's a basis of the political criteria formulated in Copenhagen in 1993. We are now operating under a new enlargement methodology that we presented more than 2 years ago, and it's now being applied, first of all, to North Macedonia and Albania full, but also to Serbia and Montenegro and other countries that decided to opt into that. So we will we can use it with regard to all candidate countries, and there you can see that the fundamentals remain a centerpiece of our approach. Obviously, we do not look at the public administration reform in isolation. It is closely linked with the rule of law, anti-corruption reforms of democratic institutions as part of the first cluster, the fundamental cluster that's on the table until the very end of the accession negotiations. Well, the challenge the Western Balkans face now is how to transform administration successfully towards more professional, depoliticized and transparent civil services that include civil society in its policies and effectively and efficiently manages the resources of the state. There is an awareness of key reform needed to create such administrations overall, but more leadership and efforts are needed to improve policy planning, public finance, people management and accountability. And there certainly civil society can make a contribution, which brings me to my second point about citizens first. Well, the challenge of modern state governance is to navigate the many different needs and interests and those of the businesses, professionals, civil societies, vulnerable groups, urban and rural communities. They all aspire to have a voice in governance and deserve to receive services by a responsible and responsive administration. Therefore, it is important to make sure that no one is left behind or underrepresented. So how to promote this is the citizens' perspective? Under our public administration reform principles, we promote the citizens' first approach through reforms of policy-making structures that consult and include citizens' views, through reforms on free access to information, and through focus on core pillars such as professional civil service, as well as reforms of accountability lines in public administration that come all to the benefit of administration that serves the public good. And indeed, as mentioned in our enlargement package, It is important for public institutions and administrations to be both responsive to societal concerns and effective in delivering policies. Governments and public administrations have a big responsibility, and they need to navigate a political space with different interests. And we rediscovered the importance of a well-functioning state during COVID, because people expected a lot from the administration and the states. That is going to stay with us. But in line with our values, both policy and services should promote societal inclusion and cohesion and aim to reduce polarization. And this brings me to my third point, developments which can contribute to better public administration, which is the gist of the WeBER program. It monitors public administration reforms in the Western Balkans. It's a way of holding public administration and governments accountable, and this is important. And to be successful, it also depends on how you do this work. So I would propose to emphasize as much as possible the perspective of being a partner that will co-create and help find solutions to complex problems. The innovation of the public sector and social innovation go hand in hand to a large extent, and you can contribute to building trust and to creating a better future together. It is true and unfortunate that we still need to address issues such as undue political influence in the public administration and the corruption that usually comes with it. Additionally to these, there are a lot of new challenges that public administrations have to adapt to, arising from the changed geopolitical context, economic and energy crisis, etc. And so for all these public administrations, together with the civil society, need certainly three things. First, good crisis management, if needed and when needed. Again, COVID is a good example. Second, public administration needs to be agile in delivering good services that meet people's demands. And finally, public administration needs to innovate, or be able to innovate, to adapt to the challenges of the day. So I've spoken quite a lot about values and the importance of public administration for the quality of democratic institutions and the rule of law. We need to rebuild this relationship between state and citizens that is based on trust. It's not obvious, but it's possible. And we'll still have state hierarchies to ensure necessary stability, but we need to collaborate effectively between markets and networks of relevant stakeholders to find solutions. And we need to rebuild a culture of respectful communication and compromise. Well, let me end on a personal note. Before becoming a faceless Brussels-based bureaucrat, I was a Polish civil servant and a diplomat for about 18 years. And I still remember vividly when I passed the competition to become member of the Polish civil service. And that was in early 2000, so 22 years ago, almost 23. And it was such a big event. So the first batch of the relatively young people at that time who passed the competition, that the Prime Minister bothered to come himself and to hand over the acts of nomination. And that gave me a real sense of pride and a sense of mission in my work. And I really hope that the colleagues working in the administrations of the candidate countries will experience the same sense of pride and the sense of mission, and we are ready to help them getting there, because the challenges our societies face today are too complex to be solved by politicians and bureaucrats alone. We also count on civil society's input into that. I wish you a fruitful discussion on the topic, and good luck. Thank you.
Mr. Gregor Virant, Head of Sigma Program of Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, will be live with us in a moment to give his keynote speech.
Thank you, dear Minister, dear Director General Popovsky, dear Milena. dear colleagues. It is a pleasure and an honor to address you and help setting the scene for the third WeBER conference. Of course, the pleasure would be greater if I were able to be with you in person, but it just didn't work out this time. WeBER started back in 2015 and now already has a certain tradition. In Sigma, we regard you as partners, and we appreciate your work for multiple reasons. Firstly, your monitoring methodology is based on the same normative framework as ours, that is on the principles of public administration. Secondly, your work and insights nicely complement ours without overlapping or duplication. And thirdly, the great added value of your insights is that you are doing the monitoring work in your respective home countries, which you know better than anyone external, and that you are doing it from an impartial perspective of NGOs. I would say that professionalism and impartiality are your key assets to cherish. The now already traditional title of your conference is Citizens First. I think it is a great title, as it reminds us in the most succinct way that public administration reforms should have the citizen in the center of all endeavors. Let me reflect a little on this. It is not always easy to connect PAR activities and objectives with the impact on citizens. There are not many areas of PAR where these linkages are obvious and which are directly tangible for an ordinary citizen. The services and administrative procedures, obviously. Access to public information, also. Public consultation in the policy-making processes as well. These are the aspects of PAR where the citizen meets public administration face-to-face and experiences change firsthand. But the thing is that most of other aspects of PAR appear somewhat remote from the perspective of an ordinary citizen. HR planning, training, recruitment, budget preparation, RIA, internal financial control, organization and accountability, oversight, etc. They don't directly affect an average citizen, but we all know they are nevertheless extremely important for the quality of life, for welfare, for prosperity. The problem is that the general public and also the political leaders sometimes overlook the importance of these, I would say, indirect impacts and underestimate some aspects of PAR. Our findings, I mean, Sigma findings, as well as yours, underpin this proposition. Now, you all know that Sigma carried out a fully fledged assessment of PAR in the Western Balkans in 21, and our findings show that the strongest progress in performance has been made, guess where? In the area of service delivery, with a strong focus on digital services. On average, around 40% of citizens now say they are satisfied with the quality of services in the Western Balkans. In one country, it was even over 60%. A vast majority of success stories in the region are associated with services and digitalization. Minister Aliti mentioned some of them from his country. This was proven once again in the recent Western Balkans Public Administration Awards competition, organized jointly by Sigma and RESPA, where all awarded projects were in the area of service delivery and digital enablers. We have seen remarkable progress on enablers such as digital identity and payment. We have seen nicely built integrated services around live events. One live event in particular, namely birth of a baby, is trending across the region, which makes me very glad, as I was in the heart of launching and implementing this idea. We have seen user-friendly portals and advanced new integrated data registries, such as the population registry. We have seen tremendously successful interoperability projects, etc., etc. What is the secret behind the successful progress in the area of services? There are multiple factors, but the most important one is that there is political will and ownership. Politicians understand how tangible it is and how citizens and businesses appreciate better services. This is why in this area, things move quite fast and in the right direction. On the other hand, the same level of political commitment is not necessarily always present when it comes to the topics which are less directly tangible for the citizens, but for which we all know, as I said before, that they are equally important. The impression is that sometimes the main motivation for governments to pursue reforms in these areas is EU accession. They don't have in sight the indirect benefits these reforms are bringing to the citizens, and they just don't own these reforms. I have two messages, or better to say suggestions in this respect, mainly to our community, to the community of experts who provide advice, who support governments in public administration reforms. Firstly, we as experts should all make more efforts to explain to prime ministers and other ministers the causalities, to make them understand that all these things are good, not only for ticking the EU integration boxes, but are also beneficial for the citizens and for the governments themselves. For example, consulting stakeholders in the process of development of a law is beneficial both for the citizens and for the government. The minister and other policymakers will get a much better insight in the subject matter of the regulation, as the stakeholders know exactly what the regulation means in practice. They have to live with it on a daily basis. So they will make a more informed and a better decision, a decision that will work better and will be better accepted. Such a minister will, in general, be more successful than the colleague who pays no or little attention to stakeholder consultation. Another example, recruiting competent professionals with integrity, confidence, and with courage to speak truth to the government will make it easier for that government to govern, to identify and respond to policy issues, and deliver results. So again, good for the citizens, good for the success of the government, win-win. Or saving money through sound policy, sound public procurement will provide fiscal space to cut taxes, and so on and so forth. We need to talk this way to highlight the benefits of all these reforms for the citizens and for the governments themselves, because this narrative can help to change the political attitude, create genuine commitment and ownership of reforms by the political leadership. Of course, the attitude and the culture do not change overnight, but if they are changing consistently in the right direction, one can tell the difference over a longer period. And I've been present in PAR in the region long enough to be able to testify about this. Things are changing, maybe not at the speed of light, but they are changing. We sometimes overestimate what can be done in 2 or 3 years, but we also often underestimate what has been done in last 10 or 15 years. My second message or suggestion, in order to help changing the attitudes and the culture and to gain genuine commitment and ownership of reforms, we as experts should focus on values and principles. And here my message resonates with what Director General Popovsky was talking about, the values, focus on values. We should not be prescriptive in our advice. We should not pretend we know better which technical option is best for a given country. And above all, we should not expect from governments in the Western Balkans or elsewhere to introduce theoretically ideal, sterile solutions without taking into consideration the country-specific context, the tradition, and the need to advance gradually. Our first role, and the role of anyone assisting the countries in improving their public administration systems, is therefore to promote and explain the values, the principles of good public administration. In Sigma, as a joint initiative of the EU and the OECD, principally financed by the EU, we of course promote the European values and principles, which are basically shared also by the OECD. This is also the main reason for this partnership, and vice versa. Promoting the values means showing the goal, the objective. For example, the state must be a competitive employer and must recruit competent people for the jobs. Policies and regulations must be based on sound analysis and evidence and thoroughly discussed with the stakeholders, etc. These are the values, the principles. And then our second, more technical role is to show to the countries the possible ways, the technical options, how to get there. Because there is not one single way. In the EU member states and OECD member states, you can find a variety of practices which all lead to achieving the same goals. So we should not prescribe to the countries which way is the best, because any of the ways can be good and European. It is up to the government to decide whether the Irish or German or maybe Spanish or Estonian model of senior civil service management, or perhaps a combination of different models, is best in the context of their traditions and circumstances. Government should choose the options and models that suit them best, that fit best in their context, and they should choose it genuinely and own it. Genuine commitment and full ownership, this is what we need for things to improve. As you probably know, Sigma is working as we speak hand in hand with the European Commission, with engineer and also from colleagues from some other directorates on a new updated version of the principles of public administration. And we are doing it exactly with these guiding stars in mind, to focus on values and principles and leave to the governments to find the best fitting way to get there. I would, of course, be happy to share with you interesting examples to underpin my points, just not today, as my time has run out, but at some other occasion, of course, with pleasure. Thank you very much for the invitation and for your attention. I'll be back at noon to listen to the presentation of your monitoring report, to which I look very much forward. I will be all ears. Thank you very much again, and back to you. And greetings from Paris.
Many thanks to Mr. Birant. The program now proceeds directly to the spotlight discussion titled European Citizens Consultations, Participatory Democracy in the EU and Lessons Learned from the Western Balkans.
Are our speakers already? Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this hybrid spotlight discussion of the third conference organized in the framework of the WeBER project, whose objective has always been to engage citizens and civil society in public administration reforms in the Western Balkans. Today's panel will shine a bright spotlight, we hope, on citizens in particular, and on the role that citizens can or should play across the region in monitoring the work of their public administrations. And to this end, we will first reflect on the experience of the European Union and of the member states with citizens' involvement in political affairs, beyond elections, of course, and at different levels of government, so that we can extract best practices and lessons learned that could potentially be translated now also in the Balkan context. And then we will hear about the experiment that was undertaken by the WeBER project with citizens' consultations in the region. And we will end with an assessment of the prospects of participatory democracy in the Western Balkans. It is an ambitious plan, but I'm confident that the panel that we have lined up for you is up to the challenge, given that all the fierce ladies who have accepted to speak here today are extremely knowledgeable on the subject, as well as very passionate about the role that citizens' participation plays in updating democracy to keep up with modern times. It is therefore my pleasure to introduce to you Gaetan Ricardniul, Deputy Head of the Unit on Citizens Dialogues at the European Commission, and Calypso Nicolaidis, Chair in International Affairs at the School of Transnational Governance at the European University Institute, both of them joining us online, as you can see. And with us in the room, we have Maike Bran, Project Manager at Mission Publique, and Milena Lazarevic, WeBER 2.0 Team Leader and Program Director at the European Policy Center, Belgrade. A big and warm thank you to all of you online and here in the room. Thank you so much for taking the time to contribute to this discussion today. I will first have an exchange with our distinguished speakers, and then I will take questions and comments from the audience here in the room, but also online. If you are joining us remotely, you are welcome to send us written questions at any time during the meeting, beginning now, if you want. Otherwise, please click on the respective icon for the virtual hand to be raised, and I will give you the floor once we come to that part of our meeting. And with that, I would like to start by mentioning that over the past years, hundreds and hundreds of deliberative initiatives engaging hundreds of thousands of citizens in decisions about real issues. For example, how to spend the city's budget, or how to improve the quality of air, or how to deal with online hate and harassment, or whether to legalize same-sex marriage, and so on, have been documented and have taken place worldwide, including at the local, national, and regional level across the member states, as well as on the EU tier of governance. The recent conference on the future of Europe, as well as the European Commission's plans to make citizens' consultations a regular feature of decision-making in the EU, are further evidence or testify to the great momentum that the participatory trend has had and continues to be gaining. But how do we explain this deliberative wave, as it has been called? This is the question that I want to begin with, and I want to address to Gaetan, to Calypso, and also to Maike. Why is it that we need new means for citizens to engage in politics? I'll first maybe give the floor to Gaetan, if she doesn't mind.
I certainly don't. Good morning, everyone. I hope that you can hear me well. Yes? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy that we have the chance to share this very important topic, which is indeed trending, and it's very good news. So I want to say, first of all, that what we've called indeed the deliberative wave is this idea that we are increasingly testing some democratic innovation that will involve more directly the citizens, and that they will create the conditions for them to deliberate together and propose collective recommendation on some very important policy-making issues. I will talk later about the specific experiment we had on that at the transnational level with the Conference on the Future of Europe. But why do we need this? The first thing I would like to highlight here is we are not building that against representative democracy. And I would like to really emphasize that, because there is also some people who might want to push this as a major criticism of representative democracy. Of course, it has its weaknesses nowadays, and like most systems which shows some sign of fatigue, we need to innovate, and this is where we are. We need to create spaces for citizens to discuss together, deliberate together, make policy recommendation outside election. So between two elections. It doesn't, of course, mean that election is not anymore a good way to exercise democracy, But it's very clear nowadays that with the kind of flow of information people are confronted with, the way they act through social media, how can we channel all this energy that we see into a real active citizenship between election? And this is where we are. And the second element where I think we need to develop more this kind of new participatory and deliberative processes would be about the 3D. So the first of all is deliberation. Of course, we mentioned it. I think it is very, very important nowadays in a world of this social media activity where people tend to act very individually, to create these spaces where citizens can be together, collectively discuss and make recommendations. The other D for me is dialogue, because how are these recommendations made? They are made through a peaceful dialogue, and it's quite important nowadays in the context that we all know, that we create these spaces where citizens can discuss together peacefully and make recommendations. And the third D, which for me is very important, is the diversity element, because this is something that is not happening so much anymore, that people from very different backgrounds are meeting together, discussing and changing. And this diversity, and this is for me the strength of this deliberative wave and of these deliberative processes, is that we are creating citizens' assemblies that are representative of sociological and geographical diversity. So we have people from all ages, different genders, different geographical background, urban, rural, people with different level of education, socioeconomic background, talking together. And these spaces, unfortunately, exist less and less in our democracy. So I think it's one of the major reasons why I'm a big promoter of these kind of deliberative processes, because as I said, not only we desperately need this democratic innovation to make sure that our representative democracy are fit for the new times ahead of us, but also because I really think that our democracies desperately need these spaces where a diverse group of people get together, take the time out of their, very hectic life usually to discuss with each other, look at different point of view, listens to different point of views. And of course, at European level, this is very exciting because we have a third challenge, which is not only to reinforce these democratic practices, but also to create a new kind of democracy, which is the transnational democracy at EU level. So it's not only about reinforcing active citizenship at local, at regional, national level, but creating also a new sense of belonging to a new arena, which is the European Union. And of course, not only the European Union, but at other levels of transnational democracy that we will need for the future, as many, many issues that we need to tackle can only be tackled at global level. And maybe I will stop here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gaetan. Calypso, we've heard that for Gaetan, this is a democratic innovation that is helping to channel citizens' energy into active citizenship. What does it mean for you, and why is it important?
Hello, Karina, and hello, everyone in Belgrade. I listened with great interest from Florence, where, of course, 600 years ago, citizens were much more involved than today in these Italian republics. And it was also very interesting to hear Gregor Varent from Sigma, including because, well, 10 years ago, I worked with many, many colleagues in Sigma to produce a rule of law report, and which led to a little book on the rule of law that I did. And as I listened to what was said previously from our panel, I could hear that there is a tension, or not a productive tension, a constructive tension, when Elena started us off with citizens-friendly reform, and all speakers took more or less a functional defense of citizens' involvement. We need their intelligence. They are our users. And that comes in tension with, or is on a spectrum with not so much taking citizens or as consumers or public services or clients or users, but really as citizens who want to own the state. And indeed, it was very interesting to hear Mr. Popovsky talk about the need for depoliticized services, but navigating a political space. So I think we need to, first of all, be in that tension and realize that with deliberation, we want to try to kind of hold both ends of the spectrum, as Gaetan made very clear a minute ago. And so, if you will, this wave is a response to it, to kind of four, I would say, just to complement Gaetan, to four needs, different kind of representation. So deliberation is not an alternative to traditional representative democracy, but it's a different way of doing it with a cross-section of the public, these mini publics. Then, secondly, there is a kind of real yearning for democratic equality, a means to distribute power beyond elites, a response to the populist, very deep appeal to how people want democratic equality, backed up by more economic equality. And thirdly, perhaps important if you're a kind of political philosopher that cares about structure, is the idea of greater impartiality from these deliberative citizens, because, well, they come and go in these assemblies, so they can't be captured so easily by special interest, by corruption, etc. They're not perfect, and Gaetan was their greatest advocate and defender, during the European Citizens Assembly. And we all thought they were amazing in rising to the challenge. But of course, they're not perfect, but at least they can't be captured. And so when you're talking climate change, for instance, well, you don't want captured citizens. And finally, maybe very importantly also, is this question of diversity, epistemic democracy, as we say with our jargon, and the idea that a much more diverse range of viewpoint will be heard by people who haven't made politics their career. All this, and that there is a kind of wisdom of the crowds that come from that. Now, all of this to say that I really want to back Gaetan's point that what we're discussing today is how these deliberative processes can back up the kind of administrative reform that you're speaking about, not just to design them, but actually to monitor them. So at every level, there will be a plus and not a replacement, neither for the administration, nor for politicians, nor for judges.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you so much, Calypso. Maike, these are a different kind of doing democracy. Complement to representative democracy. Is that how you see it, and why is it necessary in your viewpoint?
I think when we have actually the two great speakers before us, actually it was pointed out at several times. In my eyes, when we go back to the initial question that you demanded us 10 minutes ago about the democratic wave, there is much explanation in this metaphor. I would like to start with something like an enlargement of this metaphor. Imagine you don't have only a wave, but imagine you have the whole ocean or a whole sea. Whatever ocean or sea you have in mind, there are always, or very often, the tides, the ebb and the flow. The water is coming and the water is also going back. And when we take the historical framework of participatory democracy, we can very much see that since the 80s, and not only during the last 12 years, there were different waves. For example, there was a whole wave in the 80s about mini publics being held in small villages, in cities, all over Europe. And later then, in the 90s, there was a great trend about participatory budgeting, for example. What does that mean? That means that actually public administrations, for example, the mayor, allows citizens to comment on the use of public money. This was actually a very, very strong trend in the 90s. And then, this is very much true, we have this kind of wave starting at the beginning of the of 2010-12. And this is really, we have really seen a tipping point over the last 4 days. 4 years, sorry. And I think this is no evidence. Of course, this is due to the fact that this wave also gained momentum by advocacy that was made for participatory democracy. There is a lot of research that has done, and there is also, of course, a very trend of professionalization of participatory democracy. But when we analyze this wave, it really comes down to the importance, why it is so important to enrich traditional democracy or representative democracy. And for me, there are 2 points. The first one, Calypso pointed out extremely well. We are actually confronted by a huge loss of citizen confidence in democracies, in parliaments, in electors. And this is much fragilizing our whole democratic system. And the second point, and this was really something that Gaëtan pointed out, it is nowadays very, very rare that we get the opportunity to talk to people from different backgrounds, from different ages. For example, not people in which we are linked by familiar means. I don't talk about grandparents, but maybe elderly people out of our family. And this is something that also contributes to the fact that our societies, in terms of social classes, are drifting out together, drifting in two different poles, and also, of course, social classes. I mean, poverty is gaining more and more in most EU states, and this was really, of course, something that that democracy has to take into account. And one possibility to confront this is, for example, participatory democracy. So for me, there are really these kind of 2 points that I really want to share.
Great.
with you.
Thank you so much, Maike. So, Milena, I come to you now. We've heard that from different perspectives that there is actually a real societal political need to which citizen participation is responding to. Of course, it's, as Maike says, one way in which we can look to innovate and to update our democracy in the EU. But to what extent is the situation comparable in the Balkans? Why would we need such instruments and such new ways of doing democracy in the region? If you can reflect based on what you've heard on and compare it with the Balkans.
Yes, well, I would say that this need is even more pronounced here in the region. We heard yesterday at the discussion of the EU's enlargement package, which we had in the same room, that all of the countries in the region are currently, by the Freedom House reports, defined as hybrid regimes, not even as semi-consolidated democracies. So in a situation where obviously there is a struggle to build, rebuild, or construct democratic institutions, basic democratic institutions, I would say that this need to reach out to citizens directly becomes even larger. Now, of course, the focus of the WeBER project has mainly been on raising or amplifying citizens' voices, specifically in public administration reform. But I think that what we have done, or what we have started doing through the WeBER project, is just one test or one issue in which we can use as an example, but then actually speak about and plan to improve and to widen these experiences and these practices to all other issues. And you mentioned many issues in which citizen consultations and European citizen panels were organized in the European Union, which are not related to what we have done in our project, but which we could also disseminate to other areas. So basically, when citizens actually don't trust in the democratic institutions, so when they don't necessarily trust the elections, the democratic process, it is extremely important, at least for those of us in the non-governmental sector, to try to reach out of them and to try to amplify, and as I mentioned in my intro speech, to speak with their voices to the policymakers and decision makers. Over the years, since 2015, WeBER project has insisted a lot on speaking with evidence, and we have all really thought, and we still think that for us as civil society, it is important when we speak to the policymakers to speak with evidence, to speak based on facts. But then we also realize that there are certain limitations to what we can obtain in terms of the power of our messages when we speak just based on surveys, on public perceptions. And public perceptions often usually don't really reveal what is behind certain citizens' views. So for example, what we have found repeatedly in our public perception surveys is that there is a huge discrepancy between how citizens see the general government's efforts to improve, digitalize services, innovate, modernize the service provision, and between their sense of empowerment, their sense of ability to influence, both on the questions of to what extent civil society and citizens are involved in monitoring the work of the service delivery, and to what extent administrations ask for their inputs, for their proposals. The percentages are always much lower than on these general questions when we ask them how they feel in general about service provision and governmental efforts to improve service delivery. So this is exactly where we saw this space to reach out to citizens directly. Of course, there are certain limitations. I'm sure that we will get into them, but this is the overall, let's say, the rationale and the understanding with which we entered this exercise in our project.
And do I understand correctly that there is a lack of experience and expertise in the region on how to engage with this kind of practices?
Absolutely. And, civil society in the region has for years been implementing various exercises in consulting and reaching out to citizens. But overall, they haven't been structured. And, we haven't had this this size of an exercise which has been undertaken at the EU level. So in that sense, EU experience is extremely valuable. You guys have learned a lot already through several waves of doing this, and I was fascinated by the amount of research, analysis, really in-depth thinking about how to systematize and what are let's say, necessary elements in order to make these consultations and these participatory processes not only a nice exercise of talking to citizens and gathering their inputs, but also in actually changing people's maybe very narrowly embedded views because they did not have a chance to deliberate with people of different opinions. So these are all extremely important messages and the extremely important lessons learned that we still need to find good ways and good capacities to implement in the region.
And I hope that we can now share some of these lessons and best practices. So I will turn to our EU-based speakers, including, starting from Michael this time. And I was wondering if you can tell us about some of the concrete instruments or ways in which citizens are involved in politics in the EU member states at the national, local, regional level.
Sure. Of course, it's difficult to give in this framework a whole list.
No, sure. So, just some examples.
So just really some examples. Of course, it's the most important fact to remember is that there is citizen participation on really every political governance level. This is the first key message. We can actually see today that about 50% of participatory projects are held on the local level, for example, by local participatory budgeting. We can see also, of course, a large of citizen assemblies. We also have, of course, citizen dialogues, and also we have citizen juries. The difference between assemblies and juries is the fact that juries are very much often on a little bit smaller scale in terms of participants, what about under 25, and other formats are trying actually to mobilize in general amount of participants that is over this value. Of course, I think it is also very much due to the fact that policymakers think, of course, citizens can respond best to issues that are on the table directly in front of their house door, which is, of course, not only not true, and there are other formats proving this. So, of course, citizens can also engage on a regional level by the same formats, participatory budgeting, and also panels, dialogues, and assemblies, for example. We can nowadays see that the amount of regional participatory projects are about 30. So when we come back to the numbers, you see that 80% of on projects based on participatory democracy makes 30% out of it. So there is a strong belief in the fact that local issues are more relevant. And this is something that me personally, I don't think it's true, and this is something that we need to foster, that actually citizen experiences and intellectual and collective intelligence can be of great value also on other steps of governance. So when it comes down actually to national dialogues, we are about 15% in general with the same format. So you can also see in the second key message that I want to leave, that actually, of course, these formats are actually usable on all levels. So they are extremely valuable, but they are very much, of course, linked to the issue that you want to deal with. And of course, and this is something on which we are working, especially for Mission Publique, which is actually an agency based in Paris, Bonn, and Brussels. We are very much engaged, also pushing subjects, issues and projects on an international and transnational scale, because we consider that nowadays issues like the COVID crisis and the climate change are, of course, something that can be dealt on the local level and that needs to be dealt on the local level, but also on all other levels. And collective intelligence, user knowledge of the citizens is crucial to give and respond to these to the decisions that have to be taken in the years, months, and days to come.
Thank you, Maike. And this leads me very smoothly to Gaetan, because, of course, as we've heard, this effort to innovate democracy have not been confined only to the member state level. We have tried to scale up these instruments for the European Union level, and you have been very much at the center of this effort. So I wonder if you can share with us some insights of how this is playing out in the EU, and what does this experience tell us about EU-level participatory democracy?
Yes, thank you, Karina. I think it's important indeed that it was recalled that this has been a practice going on for quite a long time now at local, regional, and more recently perhaps also at national level. We've seen a few citizens' assemblies which have been a bit more visible in the media, in Ireland, in France, in Germany. At the pan-European level, we had also some experiments, but at a very, very small, with very small ambition and scale. So this conference on the future of Europe was really an unprecedented exercise. We did did it for 1 year, and it was striking in two ways. First, it was the three main institutions of the EU, so the European Commission, the Council of Ministers, and the European Parliament, who together organized this conference, which makes sense, of course, for the citizens who was asked to give his opinions and views on the future of Europe. And of course, then it makes sense that you actually address the three main institutions who are the main legislative actors for the future of Europe. And the second striking element is that in all the main pillars of the conference, we tested democratic innovation. And as Calypso was saying, with a lot of success, with things that we can still improve, but I think that the sheer fact that in all of these pillars we had something innovative was very important, because now we are building up on these innovations to create a new phase of citizen engagement in the EU. Very shortly, what were these innovations? Maybe to remind everyone, we called the three Ps, which were the three pillars of the conference. The first one was an online platform. The two important innovations on that platform were the fact that it was a deliberative space, and it was a multilingual deliberative space. Thanks to e-translation, we could have, a Slovak commenting on an idea coming from an Italian, responding to one from a German, and we created this space for a direct exchange between citizens online. The second pillar was the one that is the most related to what we are talking about today, were the European citizens panels. So 4 randomly selected citizen assemblies, representative of EU sociological and geographical diversity. They met 3 weekends and they made policy recommendations. And these recommendations were brought to the third P, which was the plenary, which was also an unprecedented body because it mixed the citizens coming from the panels, national and European panels, and political representatives, but also organized civil society, local authorities, so a body of 450 members who worked together for a few more weekends and made policy proposals. So what we are doing now is the follow-up phase of these proposals. We had 49 proposals with more than 320 measures. Each institution is now looking at it. We are doing the follow-up. There will be a feedback event for the citizens in December. And we are on that basis also following up on the recommendation that were linked to citizens' engagement and participation, because the citizens ask for more. And so we are building up a new phase of citizen engagement. On the European Commission side, it means that the President of the Commission has announced it, that the European Citizens Panels will become a regular feature of our policy making. So every year for 2 or 3 key initiatives, we will have a European panel that will provide policy recommendation. As it is for the European Commission, it is before a proposal is made. So we'll have the first one very soon on food waste. And of course, the online part also will remain, because this deliberative space will be kept. We will have a one-stop shop online for all citizen engagement for the European Commission, so linking the existing public consultation with the European Citizen Initiative and with this new deliberative space, where we would like more citizens to join in giving ideas for policy making at EU level, because at the moment, we have to be honest that the public consultation are mainly for stakeholders, not so much for citizens everywhere. So we hope to combine these new citizen assemblies at European level with an online participation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Gaetan. Real progress, real things happening, very exciting. Just I'm wondering if I can use this opportunity to ask here in the room whether you have heard about the Conference on the Future of Europe that happened. If you have heard, please raise your hand. I'm very curious.
it's good that I don't see it, right?
No, actually, Gaetan, you'd be surprised, but I would say about half of the people in the room have heard. So this is good news, which I don't know. I want to take as excitement or eagerness that they are following what's happening in the EU and possibly want to be engaged. So maybe next time around they will be engaged. But coming to now to Calypso. How do you assess these efforts that have been going on at the national and European level? Is there a correct way to do these kind of exercises? So in terms of principles, in terms of standards. I mean, I think Gaetan touched very briefly on some of the important issues that one has to watch out for. But I wonder if you can go in a little bit more detail for us about what is important to look for when implementing such exercises.
Corina, I think that Gaetan very brilliantly explained, the innovative character of COFI and the fact that indeed it's an experiment. This is the key term. Now, of course, experiment doesn't mean once and for all experiment. We talked about, Maike picked up on deliberative wave, but this is a wave of experiment. That is, you learn from one to the other. So for me, the first key to progress is this willingness to learn from each time. And that's what Gaetan is describing now with the way in which the Commission is going forward with citizens panels. The second thing I would say, it would be to really pick up on both Maike and Gaetan. This wave turns into an ocean, Maike, well, not everyone is swimming in that ocean. And they're staying on the beach. So what we have learned also is that it's quite a challenge to connect to the greater public sphere. The institutions tried, all of us, the ecosystem, Corina, you were part of it, all of us in the panel and many in the room, and yet we were still a bubble. So how do you do that? And there's a lot to say. Thirdly, I would say also picking up on Maike's point about the fact that we start at the local level. I think that at this stage, this conference is about reform that starts at the local level. It's about bottom up. But then Gaetan and I are talking, and we are all talking about this transnational level. Now, let's stop thinking of these as different logic. What we need to have, the vision we need to develop is for pan-European ecosystem of deliberative and participatory democracy, where you have a lot of, it's not just about scaling up, that we have horizontal connection across border, across towns in Serbia or Montenegro or North Macedonia, but also across countries. Gaetan was just talking about the beauty of the platform that allows for this direct exchange, and that was by design. So this horizontality means that we're not separating the local and the transnational. They're about developing a culture where we know about each other's processes. But a third point, very importantly, is about civil society organizations, many of which are represented in the room, I'm sure, and I know. This is not about an atomized process picking up a few hundred citizens who are kind of floating in the sphere. It's about bringing them, and that was what an even more inclusive space where not just randomly selected citizens, but the civil society organizations, as Milena said very, very rightly, in regions with hybrid regimes like in the Balkans, but also everywhere around Europe, have a really hard time in terms of funding power. They don't even have a pan-European statute. There's much to say about civil society organization, and they need to be empowered through these processes too. And my final point, Corina, would be to pick up on Milena's point about evidence and what citizens really want, which is where we should always start. That's real broad, the big difference between their sense of the politics of it all and their personal experience. And a lot of what you're talking about in the conference Citizens First is how citizens experience the state, politics, whether it's fair in their life. And it's a bit like when we talk about democracy and the rule of law, It's a bit like oxygen. You just realize that it's important when you don't have it anymore. So we need to find ways to listen to citizens' experience about breaches of democracy and rule of law in their town, in their state, and at the European level. I, for one, would love to see, we're working with the European Parliament on a platform for citizens to exchange these experiences. And maybe that can be connected to the platform that Gaetan is working on, expanding the Conference on the Future of Europe. And from this platform, you can imagine deliberation between citizens that are sharing the same experiences, and ultimately citizens' assembly making recommendations on the basis of the experience of citizens who contributed their grievances. So you can imagine, so I guess my last point is plug back to the citizens in innovative ways, where you can connect citizens' assemblies with much more directly with kind of emergent willingness to contribute to this kind of radical transparency of how citizens experience their state, their administration.
Do I understand correctly that this platform should include citizens from the Western Balkans, or should be open to citizens from the Western Balkans? Did I understand correctly?
Rina, you know me. I mean, I've set up programs on the Balkans ever since Harvard about 30 years ago. And I am a very great believer in enlargement. And part of what we're talking about, and again, mentioned it at the beginning. Yes, we're talking about the day-to-day life of citizens in the region today, but we are also talking about making sure that the societies, and not just the officialdom, is ready for enlargement and can prove it. If you ask me, I think it should happen very much faster than it is happening now, and this conversation we're having today is part of the story.
Thank you very much, Calypso. Milena, we've heard how the EU and the member states are experimenting. There's this real wave of experimentation, as Calypso put it. And we know that WeBER has experimented with citizens' consultations in the region for the first time, I'm guessing, ever. What are some of the challenges and some of the things that you've discovered in a positive sense from the exercise that you've undertaken?
Well, I have to start by emphasizing that WeBER did not perform or conduct these citizen consultations directly. We did it through our local partners, and we did it through a small grant facility through which we supported 31 local organizations across the region to implement their own projects, which were proposed and designed by themselves, using some of the basic guidance and criteria which we offered in the call for proposals. So this is one important thing to keep in mind. It is also important to keep in mind that we did not commission these organizations to do a service for us, but we actually supported them to perform their own actions. And this did, let's say, affect the level of influence which we could exert on exactly what the partners were doing locally. We received 25 citizen consultation reports, and through analysis of those reports, we could observe some good, but also some, let's say, not so good practices, and we could really draw some lessons for the future. It is very important what Calypso mentioned, that we need to learn from experience, and for us, this first exercise is indeed a learning experience which we would like to apply in our future endeavors and in our future work with civil society organizations across the region. What stems out of this exercise is definitely that local partners, local organizations, which are, let's say, the best suited to approach the citizens, they really do need not only training, which we did provide, but they need day-to-day support, and they need, let's say, real engagement, possibly from EU partners directly, which we could not ensure in the scope of this project. It would be ideal, actually, that they receive more direct support from the EU organizations that have experience in order to be able to apply all of the criteria which have been mentioned and which also colleagues from EPC insisted on in the training which was provided. That said, definitely these citizen consultations have shown to be a valid and very valuable exercise. One of the important takeaways is that indeed local organizations which implemented them were able to really raise the awareness not only of the citizens but also of the local officials of how important dialogue with citizens is and how important it is to actually include and ask citizens about various issues related to public administration reform. And we have seen a variation of topics in different local contexts. In many cases, of course, local organizations resorted to working on areas that they felt are the closest to them as citizens and to them as civil society organizations. So they focused on issues related to transparency and participatory character of the local decision-making process. For example, digitalization of services, which is an important issue for citizens. On the other hand, we can say that what was lacking was more structure in ensuring representation, ensuring diversity. There were some good examples, and we will hear some examples in the first panel tomorrow, where several of our grantees will speak about their experiences and how they conducted these citizen consultations and how they went about also targeting participants. But it is quite difficult sometimes for local organizations to step out of the comfort zone and actually reach out to the wider society and ensure that they can have a really diverse group of people around the table or in the room. And of course, I mean, obviously, this was this was a bit easier for organizations that already deal with, for example, some issues related to gender equality or dealing and assisting citizens with disability. It was obviously a bit easier for them because they had more direct access to these diverse target groups and groups of citizens. But this is an important lesson that we need to contemplate and to see how, and this is where also I would really welcome some observations from the colleagues from the EU. Another issue that we could observe from this first exercise is that while the organizations made a lot of effort to inform the citizens, to enter into a dialogue with citizens, there was very little deliberative character in these projects. I think we only had one consultation event which was really of deliberative character to a greater extent. So what is missing is this interaction between citizens, which actually allows for new learning and for this added value in the best sense of that word. So this is where we also need to do a lot more learning, and where I think in the future EU experience will be quite important. There are also some, let's say, other topics and other issues that we could observe. One is that obviously citizens were quite welcoming of this opportunity to learn more about their rights as citizens. So, for example, some of the grantees, some of the organizations, they talked to citizens about how they can better exercise their right to information, to obtain information produced by their local administrations or by the central administration. And those kinds of interactions were quite useful in the sense that citizens really learned something valuable about their own rights as citizens. And this goes back to the very nature and origin and rationale of the WeBER project, where we really want to help empower civil society and citizens to be actors, not just consumers, as one of the previous speakers mentioned, in these governance processes. I think I'll stop here. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much, Milena. I mean, I want to then come back to our EU-based experts so that they can hopefully provide some advice to having heard the challenges that you've encountered, and maybe some suggestions on how do we go about making participatory exercises more representative and more deliberative in context where there's little experience with such instruments. But at the same time, I want to encourage, if there's any questions or comments from the participants, please raise your hand. And while participants are deciding on whether they want to intervene, I come back to the panel and maybe start this time from Calypso, because I know that you might have to leave us before the end of this meeting. So.
Indeed, and I apologize for it, but I'm teaching 10 minutes ago, so I will have to leave. And as much as I wish to be there in person and discuss in great detail with Milena all the amazing work that the project is doing. And I would say that one thing is to kind of make politics more fun. I mean, to these issues more interesting for citizens is to make them more agonistic. So to point to, that there can be different viewpoints on a lot of these issues. And what are these viewpoints? At the Conference on the Future of Europe, it happened very much in the plenary, but not always in the citizens' panels. Whereas when you look at the Irish experience or many other experiences that have been documented, Maike was talking about, and Mission Publique has been so involved in, well, we had very difficult decisions that politicians couldn't really make. And so you needed citizens to kind of weigh in, as on abortion or gay marriage, etc. But there can be more smaller decisions at the local level. Should we build this? Should we spend the town's money? This is participatory budgeting on this or that. And people will disagree very intensely. Should we take refugees? Where should we put them? And so that's one issue to get people to kind of wrap their heads around trade-offs, because politics and the state and living together is making very difficult trade-offs. Will we support vulnerable home or farmers? Money is not infinite, resources, energies. So getting people to do politics, but with a big P, not the small p of political capture and nepotism and corruption. And also, Milena was talking about better, how people better exercise their right. My experience in working on rule of law and democracy in the Balkans is that it's very much about, yes, the laws themselves, yes, the institutions, but really people understanding that they can change power structures, which are asymmetric, that it's a whole political culture that it's all about. And to really get them to see that if they lose their rights, what happened to them very concretely. So put ourselves in situations, in storytelling. What happens when you don't have this right? Today you do. What happens when you don't? Or tell me when you didn't have it. Listen to your neighbor who didn't have it. And what could he or she do? So a lot of controversy and storytellings are two things, but they're not the only ones, and we'll continue the conversation. And again, I apologize for leaving early.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Calypso, and thank you for making time to be with us here today. Very, very interesting, as always, to listen to you. Now, storytelling, controversy, and if I understand correctly, also the advice to start small. You don't necessarily need to go big from the first time. Start small, do it often. Practice makes perfect, in a sense. That's one piece of advice on the table. Gaetan, what is your recommendation? What would your recommendations potentially be?
Yes, I mean, of course you can start small experiments. I think there are basically three basic questions to ask. Who you want to talk to, how, and what for. The who is extremely important, of course, and I think you mentioned it when you said that some of the organization went in their comfort zone. And this is why I'm a great believer of random selection, because I do think that this is a very straightforward way to get out of your comfort zone, because you rely on an independent actor to do the selection, usually a polling institute, but in some countries they relied simply on municipality register or state register. And so you know that you will have in the room people who will not voluntarily come, people who sometimes are very distant from politics. And this is why I think that method is very, very promising. The second element is the how, and you can indeed have a very, very different event if you are building up a real methodology with experts of deliberation, facilitation, participation, or just a normal event or letting a bit the chaotic discussion dominate. It is an expertise, because I've heard people, when it comes to citizen participation, a lot of people think, well, we can do it because this is easy, right? And it's not. And I've seen a major difference between people who have done that for decades and now how to bring the citizens from point A to point C after a few weekends of deliberation in a way that let them come with their own suggestion and not being influenced in an undue way. Facilitation is a key expertise. And third, and this is something we haven't talked about yet so much, is the what for. I think if you mobilize citizens for a time out of their private professional life for active citizenship, it needs to be very clear what they are there for. And I think for the Conference on the Future of Europe, this is something I'm very glad that the institution understood properly, that if the citizens were to commit weekends of deliberation, they needed to be clear on what they were going to do with their input. And it doesn't mean that all the citizens' participation formats have to lead to policy recommendation that will be implemented. But you need to be very clear at the beginning of why the citizens are there for. So I think these three elements, with the who, the how, and the what for, you can actually very in a better way build up solid citizens' participation and deliberative formats.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Gaetan. Maike, Mission Publique has been very much involved in designing the Conference on the Future Europe process, and of course you have a vast experience with such exercises in practice. How do you deal with the challenges linked to representativity, but also how do you guarantee that there is deliberation happening in the process?
I think we are very much committed to the values that actually Gaetan and Calypso pointed out. For us, there are really three main attention points that we always need to consider. The first point, and maybe this new one, we are talking about what. What is the issue? This is important because it's framing, actually, of course, also the whole process. So when you're doing participatory exercises, of course, you need to decide about what you're talking about. The second point...
And if I'm sorry to interrupt you, is it fair to mention here that the what should always rather be narrower than too broad? Where do you stand on that?
It depends on very much on the time you have to discuss. I would say that there are processes where you can start large because you know that you have time, and then sometimes when you don't have maybe less time, it's better to narrow down. But when you have more time, it's always great to do agenda setting and narrow down with the citizens, because they can give you very valuable also information on what is important for us, and this gives you actually information about how to prioritize issues. And this is something also which is extremely valuable. My second point is actually, when I totally agree with Calypso and Gaetan, with who. And in my eyes, this is the point where you have to put a lot of energy in. Because just like Calypso pointed out, not every person is sitting on the beach on their towel. Sometimes you need to go very far and to make sure that these people, maybe they have never seen the beach, maybe they have never seen the ocean, but you need to make sure that they are on the ground with you.
And how do you do that?
So actually, we have a huge advantage in the EU, meaning that actually we have nowadays agencies providing these services. For example, they call really completely arbitrary phone numbers, and so they go through a lot of processes and then giving us actually the participants. So it's not actually our work. We can't provide this, but there are agencies in it who are specialized in it.
But are these recruitment processes expensive?
They are expensive, yes, but they are worth the money.
Mm-hmm. And what happens if you don't have the resources? Are there any other ways to go about it?
Yes, I think then that is the point where actually your expertise is so valuable, because this can also, of course, go very much about NGOs, cities, associations, talking to these people. And sometimes they also have to, of course, go to really very creative means, meaning that you go to places where you find these people and talk to them directly. This is the most hardest part, and there is a lot of energy where you need to put it actually in. My third point to get back is after with who, and I totally agree with Gaetan on it. I think the people, once you have gathered them together and they have discussed, they need to know about why they are there, to who they are talking, and what kind of impact they can create together. And I think I always really do a lot of advocacy on the fact that when sometimes it is not clear, this is no problem, but you need to make sure that they understand why it's not always clear and what kind of impact they can create. And whenever actually there is always a kind of follow-up, there is actually accountability towards the recommendations, towards the time citizens spend together. So whether you give positive feedback about the implementation phase, or of course, also you can also be very honest and explain to the people why it is this difficult to implement this and why it is stopping. But the transparency and the impact, in my eyes, is extremely important. And so this is really, of course, also my kind of key message for you. Don't do citizen participation because you see a wave coming up at the horizon and everyone is doing it. Really go to these kind of questions and use it when there seems that opportunity in which these key actions we pointed out are affordable.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Maike. We seem to have lost Gaetan. I hope she's still with us. I don't know if that's the case.
I am.
Yeah.
Can you hear
Okay,
me?
great, because I just don't see on the screen anymore, Gaetan, but happy you're with us. Before I continue the conversation with the panelists, I wonder if there are any questions in the room. There are no questions. I wonder whether it's because you're shy or because it's the first time we're discussing these issues. But in that case, I want to maybe ask you a few questions. Just if you've ever participated in a consultative process, please raise your hand. You have. Okay. Anybody wants to just say what it was? You don't have to go into details. Just mention what it was all about. I saw you raising your hand. Can you just tell us what this process was? Yes, that you participated in?
Consultative processes in terms of shaping the national program for the use of pre-accession funds.
Right. As civil society?
No, from the side of the government.
From the side of the government. Okay.
With civil society, so
with
not directly citizens, but still a consultative process.
Okay. Anybody else wants to share? Yes, I see a lady, a brave lady. I'm so happy. Great. Tell us.
Hello, Entela from Albania. I have participated in consultants in the municipal level about the gender budgeting before the let's say, planning of the annual budgeting of the municipality. We were invited and engaged in putting more women in the consultant process from the municipal.
As you participated as citizen or civil society?
Civil society.
Civil society. Anybody participated as citizen in an exercise, participatory exercise? No, okay. And then a follow-up question would be, how do you feel about these exercises? Do you think that it would be important to have more opportunities for citizens to engage with politics, a different level of government? How do you feel about it? If you think it's important, raise your hand. Okay. It's not a unanimous view. I wonder if somebody is skeptical about it, if they dare to raise their hand. It's okay. It's okay to be skeptical. Okay, wonderful. You're skeptical. Can you just tell us why? Just out of curiosity. There's no judgment whatsoever.
Okay, my name is Daniela Stojković-Jovanović. I came from Novi Sad. In the same time, I'm the president of a little NGO from Novi Sad, but also I was for a long time vice president of Danube Civil Society Forum. So I was also the part in the participatory process of implementation of Danube strategy. Mm-hmm. But during, exactly among 2 years ago, we started to try to defend waterland in Novi Sad. We had a big demonstration. We tried everything. Mm-hmm. As using of administrative and legal tools to convince our government, to convince our local government to stop with that destruction, because we are talking about very important waterland as green infrastructure in defense of flood of Novi Sad, but in the same time as a very important ecosystem with more than 200 protected species. Mm-hmm. In that way, we made a constitutional appeal. So many criminal charges, mm-hmm. institutional initiative, and then we came to Berne Convention. On 15th September, we received, as our government, the first decision from Berne Convention, but I have to say, unfortunately, that our government doesn't react at all. Right. So I would like to ask you what we have to do as next step. So thank you.
The reason you are skeptical is because you don't think that these kind of exercises have impact or can necessarily lead to change. Okay, we'll come back to that very important point. And finally, the last question that I have for our participants, are there any organizations in the room who have actually participated in this experiment run by WeBER and carried out citizens' consultations in their countries? Okay. Would anyone want to just say where they're from and what they did very, very briefly? Okay. I'll give it to another lady here. I'm very happy today that we have such engagement from ladies. Yes.
Okay. My name is Dušta Stojadinović. I come from Novi Sad, from the organization Gender Knowledge Hub. We carried out consultations with women regarding gender responsible budgeting on our local level, and regarding researching the needs of women, especially women who are not usually represented, like Roma women, women with disabilities, and so on. So we actually researched the needs and make the meetings with decision makers in order to plan the budget next year to be more gender responsible according to the needs that we got.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And what was something that you were pleasantly surprised with as a result of this exercise? One thing, if you can mention, and one thing that you found particularly challenging.
Well, we were pleasantly surprised how actually we easily approached and came to found actually partners from different women's organizations in Novi Sad who were really ready to actually cooperate with us and get us to those groups of women that we wanted to do the research with. And also, what is the second question?
The challenge.
The challenge was actually having the meetings with decision makers. We had a lot of difficulties just getting to them and getting them to answer. So that was a challenge also with explaining our results, but also with writing our report also on these consultations.
Okay. Thank you very much. I come back to the panel for the final remarks and for any reactions linked to what we've heard from the public. And I want to start maybe with Milena, who I see that wants to come in anyway.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I actually had a direct reaction to what the colleague from the Gender Knowledge Hub said, and it goes back to what also the other panelists have emphasized, and that is the importance of being clear about what will be the results and what can be achieved through these consultations. Obviously, when you are a civil society organization in a country that is, marked as a hybrid regime, not even a real consolidated representative democracy, it is difficult in many cases to reach the decision makers and to speak with the voice of the citizens, which is what we are trying to do. This doesn't mean that we should give up. This just means that when we interact with the citizens, we have to be extremely clear about what can be achieved and what we can offer to them, that we don't overpromise or oversell our product, because then that can lead to even more apathy and even more disappointment among the citizens. One thing which we noticed and which we came across in some of the reports from these consultations was that that organizations reported that in some cases citizens were afraid of taking part in their consultations. They were afraid that they would lose their jobs, that somehow being open and honest about what doesn't work in the local administration, in the local context, might have negative consequences for them. And this is related, of course, unfortunately, to the elements of state capture, which we have in all Western Balkan countries and which was also acknowledged in the latest reports of the European Commission published earlier this month. So I think that these are some of the issues which we really need to really think about hard, because in this context, maybe the EU experience is not fully transferable everywhere in the region, and not all EU experiences are transferable. And this is why I actually wanted to ask Gaetan and Maike whether you have come across such examples or such instances at the EU level in some of the member states, maybe of citizens being afraid of participating in these consultations, and how you managed, or how other organizations that reported to you managed to overcome these challenges.
Yes, thank you very much, Milena. And so now I do want to come back to Gaetan and Maike for final reactions to what Milena has just asked, but also if you can touch on this issue of impact and the link with policy making and the extent to which these consultations can then translate into real influence on decisions at the political level, which, if I dare to say, it's an issue that can be encountered also in the EU. It's not something that is necessarily specific to the Balkans. And finally, if I can add to that, what is your opinion about this idea that Milena has put forward regarding the need for the region to be supported not only theoretically in this exercise of passing best practices and lessons learned, but also practically, hands-on, with maybe technical experts coming to the region and working shoulder to shoulder with actors on the ground here in implementing such exercises so that they can get better and understand better what they entail and how they can do it in a more effective way. Maybe I start from Gaetane, because you're on line, and just in case there are technical issues at the end, and then we'll finish with Maike. Gaetan, please.
Yes, many issues to tackle at the end, and of course, I mean, one thing which is obvious but very important to repeat is that this citizen assembly and deliberative processes cannot be considered as such, but in a more general framework of democratic resilience, so it means, of course, I'm sorry, do you still hear me and see me?
Yes, we do.
Okay, because I don't see you anymore, so I was wondering if I had left the room or something.
Yes.
So it means, of course, that this needs to be tackled in a broader perspective on democracy and rule of law. You know, that this is part of a broader framework with you know, in institutional background that needs to be based on democratic values and rule of law. You cannot patch this on something that is not sound around. That's for sure. It's not a miracle solution. But having said that, I mean, I want to congratulate the organizers, because this comes from an organized civil society network, and I have to say that, strangely enough, in the EU, what we have been, the resistance we have seen sometimes is not only from political representatives who are afraid of this new innovation, you know, a bit scared by what they could bring, but also sometimes from organized civil society that sees that as a threat to their own activity and sphere of influence. And I'm really glad to see that this is not your take on this, that you have the right approach, which is to say that these needs to go hand in hand, that you can have a lively organized civil society if citizens around it feel empowered and feel that they can influence, because this is the starting point for them to become active citizens. And active citizens mean many things, not only participating in these assemblies, but also then maybe joining organized civil society association. What I have witnessed in the conference on the future of Europe is that most citizens who were randomly selected and never participated in public affairs before, now they want to do it. And they want to do it by, in many ways, either through direct election, maybe, but also through organized civil society. So I think there's a virtuous circle to create by organizing these kind of processes, because suddenly citizens participating in that feels that they have a say, that they heard that they can have an influence. But then we arrive at the last point, which is indeed you have to handle that very carefully so that it doesn't backfire, that people are not disappointed. So, as I said before, the what for is extremely important. It doesn't have to be a revolutionary process where citizens will change the public system, but if it's a contribution, even a small one, you have to explain what it is about.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Gait, and thank you very much for your participation. Unfortunately, I'm being told that we absolutely have to stop. So, but Maike remains with us. So any further questions can be addressed also during our break directly to Maike, and we can continue the conversation. I want to thank our speakers very much for their contributions. Really, really appreciate it. And also to our participants. And I wish you a successful continuation of the conference henceforth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coffee break. In case you need translation to English, please pick up the headset on your way back from the break, as one of our panelists will speak in local language. We will begin at 11:50 sharp, so please be back in time for the next panel. Thank you. Dear guests, we hope you enjoyed the coffee break and are ready for our next panel. Please be seated. The title of our next panel is Comparing Progress, Western Balkan PAR Monitor 2021-2022. Thank you.
Dear guests, welcome in this panel. I want to first say hello to the distinguished panelists that we have here, to the presenters, the 10 colleagues who will be making a presentation on what we have been working as 10 these past 2 years. So firstly, before I introduce the panel, I will give a word to Miloš Đinđić and Lirika Agušoli from CEP and GLPS to tell us what have been done monitoring these 2 years. And because we are saying comparing progress, then I think the aim of the panel is what we just heard in the previous one, to learn from our good examples, also from our weaknesses, with the end goal to become better, and that become better for the citizens, because the name of the panel, the conference is also the citizens first. So I just won't go deeper now. Miloš and Lirika, please.
Thank you, Ardita, and thank you everyone for being here for the presentation of this third cycle of the monitoring that we did as part of WeBER. My name is Miloš Đinđić, CEP Belgrade WeBER lead researcher, and I will be joined for this presentation with my dear colleague Lirika Agušoli, GLPS Pristina. And let's get started immediately with a couple of slides to introduce you to who we are and what we do. We can start. Okay. All right, a couple of basic facts at the beginning. So this cycle was done this year. As from the beginning, PAR Monitor zooms into 6 PAR areas as defined by the Sigma principles. We will come back to that shortly. In brief, we assessed 22 Sigma principles, previously selected based on their relevance for the civil society and citizens. And we measure them with our own indicators, where we emulate Sigma's approach in assigning them values for these indicators from 0 to 5. In the end, the outputs of our monitoring are monitoring reports, of course, 1 comparative to compare progress between the region, and 6 for national administration. They will follow in the early 2023. In brief, we rely a lot on the content analysis of the official documentation of the governments. We also rely on the review of websites, governmental websites, when looking for transparency and public informing aspects. From the beginning, one of the added value of the WeBER was perception data that we collect. And as always, we have public opinion poll. We also survey those citizens who are organized within the civil society, as well as civil servants, on specific aspects of public administration reform. I will refer to from now on, like shortly, in PAR. So PAR in general in specific aspects. And of course, for data validation, especially for some missing, questionable, or other data gaps, we rely on the use of freedom of information requests extensively. So this was shortly about the overall approach. So I was mentioning Sigma principles of public administration. There are in total 6 areas. I will name them. Just as a reminder: strategic framework, policy development, public service and human resource management, accountability, service delivery, and public finances. For each of this area, we have a number of WeBER indicators. Once measured, they are supposed to tell you how administrations perform. Lirika and I will present today majority of what we have in this third cycle, but not all. For the entire thing, you will have to wait for the reports just a little bit. And yes, looking back, this is the third installment. So we have started with the baseline monitoring a couple of years ago, determined the initial position and the baseline. We continue with the second monitoring 2 years ago, which enables us to have the first comparison against the baseline. And we moved on from there with the hope that this will continue. I cannot stress enough that the PAR Monitor is a teamwork, team effort. So if you have country-specific questions or you need more details, I would encourage you to reach out to my colleagues during these 2 days or even afterwards. And I want to thank them once again for making this monitoring possible and this presentation in the end, sorry. Now, before we zoom into the individual areas, just a brief observation about the position of the region as a whole. On the left window, you can see that when expressed on this scale, as I mentioned, from 0 to 5, the mean or average indicator values per each area are quite low in the region, though we have some tangible difference when it comes to service delivery and the PFM. The same is when all completed cycles to date are compared. And on the right window, you can see the same essentially, but from the perspective of the total scores achieved per area out of those that are available. So once again, in service delivery and public finances, we have over 50% of the total scores. Now we will go more deeply into each individual area. So now to you, Ulrika.
Thank you, Milos. Hello, dear all. Thank you again for participating in this conference. I am Lirika Agusholi from GLPS Pristina. I will begin to introduce the first area of our WeBER monitoring, which is PAR strategic framework. The selected principles are assessed entirely from the view of quality of involvement of civil society and the public in the process of development of PAR, of strategic documents, and in the participation of monitoring and coordination structures that should, in the end, ensure a purposeful implementation. We give a focus on the inclusiveness and participation, which aims to determine the extent to which relevant stakeholders' needs and views are taken into consideration when developing and implementing the reform agenda. As you can see from the slides, from the first part, when it comes to PAR to the PAR strategic framework development as a whole, consultations are always almost present in the final stages when draft strategies are already produced and room for intervention is already narrowed, a practice which we have identified in the two previous cycles as well. Practices among administrations, they differ extensively. Also, when it comes to the participation of external stakeholders during the development changes when key measures and interventions are being decided, we can say that in the half of the region, almost no early consultations have been observed, and where they actually exist, they are held for umbrella PAR strategies as a rule. When we look back to all the cycles of WeBER monitoring, processes of drafting PAR strategies tend to be more open and inclusive compared to the remaining SF-PAR documents. We can say that in Montenegro and in Serbia, the entirely new, recently adopted SF-PAR has been assessed, and compared to the other parts of the region, it was designed by a more participatory perspective from start to finish. As we can see in the second part of the slide, on the other hand, we unfortunately did not record tangible improvement on the topic of involvement of CSOs on the government PAR monitoring and coordination bodies. As revealed in previous PAR monitors of WeBER team, CSOs participate in such forums in only 3 states, which are Albania, Montenegro, and Serbia, with only development coming from the new PAR strategy in Serbia, which foresees membership of the association in the municipalities in the PAR councils. But we can say that altogether, CSOs are full members selected through open calls, with 2 exceptions. Those of Albania, which has a membership subject to invitation, and Serbia, which has the selection procedure for administrative level or PAR coordination, but is not political. Finally, for our first area, we can say that in the 3 cases, as I mentioned, Albania, Montenegro, and Serbia, although they formally allow contribution from CSOs, meetings of these bodies are not always regularly held.
We need to switch, so I hope that's fine. In the policy development area, we will look briefly over 4 things. So when it comes to governmental reporting to the public on the annual work plans, we have mostly the same situation as always. in half of the region, governments have reported to the public for 2 consecutive times, two previous years. And this is in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, and Serbia for the first time since we measure this indicator. However, the content of these reports is actually where the problem is. They rarely reflect on the results of the government as a whole, and they barely contain any data segregation, and here again, Bosnia and Herzegovina and the practice of the Council and Minister is the exception. Data from the governmental reports are barely published in open formats, again, having just one exception in BNH. Second topic, transparency on governmental decision-making at the official sessions. You can also see at the graph with indicator values, situation is unchanged, and the materials and the proceedings from these sessions are mostly concealed. This time around, we have observed no government publishing agendas, minutes, press releases, and adopted acts from the official sessions that we were analyzing, though there are always exceptions, and this time around it was a North Macedonian government where agenda items and minutes were actually public. Apart from that, main public information tools remain press releases. And when it comes to CSO perception on this, we asked them what they think, and their perception remain as unfavorable as always, with 70% of agreement that the government decision-making is transparent. Another topic is the use of externally produced evidence in the policymaking. We also observe similar practices as before, so official governmental policy documents like strategies, action plans, or programs contain references to CSO findings or research institutes or academic institutions. And it is significantly less so when it comes to ex-ante or ex-post policy papers or evaluations. When CSOs are asked how do they feel about the involvement in the policy making, in the drafting of the policy documents and the legislation, a third of them holds that the ministries invite them to the working groups for drafting legislation, and a quarter, 25%, that their contribution there is valued. Finally, we see that consultation practices with the stakeholders are increasing in numbers and in scope. However, it is still early to speak about the full inclusivity. For the policy documents and the law proposals we observed, majority of them went through some form of consultation, either earlier or later in the process. And I have to say that in Montenegro and in Serbia, majority of the documents that were observed went through at least a single consultation, and out of those consultations, for majority, the report was published. Nevertheless, consultation reports do not follow as a rule, and in this monitoring cycle, we had the example of the North Macedonia where none such report was published. When it comes to CSOs and their perception, their dissatisfaction persists, and on average, around a quarter of them agree that consultation rules are applied consistently. Erika?
Thank you, Milos. I will continue now with the third area, which is the public service and human resource management. In this area, the monitoring defines the central government civil service as defined by the relevant legislation. We see the primarily civil service law. The selected principles of the WeBER team are those that focus on the quality and the practical implementation of the civil service legal and policy framework on measures related to merit-based recruitment, use of temporary engagements, transparency of the remuneration system, integrity, and the anti-corruption in the civil service. From the first part of the slides, we can see that basic statistics on civil service are available for 3 administrations. Firstly, North Macedonia and Montenegro can be regarded as good examples due to the regular publishing of annual reports from the Register of Employees and annual personal plans, respectively. In addition, Bosnia and Herzegovina is a rare case of data accessibility in the open format. When it comes to reports on civil service and HRM areas, it is neither fully regular nor extensive. We have the most transparent ones in Albania, Montenegro, and in Serbia. However, overall, we don't have any significant changes in the whole Western Balkans regarding this issue. From the second part, we can see that no real change has been observed on the topic of the temporary hirings, as we don't have no limitations in number or in percentages. We have Serbia as a positive exception in this case, but with selection criteria largely unspecified, recruitment non-transparent, and duration limits either too flexible or non-existent, we have Kosovo as a positive example for the three factors that I mentioned. On the third part, we can see that public competitions for vacancies are once again, we can say, moderately open and transparent. Announcements are mostly broadly advertised, and results of testing and processes are transparent, but we don't have any further elaboration than the names of the successful candidates. We can say that there are still application items across the region filled with what we count as unreasonably demanding bureaucratic languages, computer proofs, mandatory state exams for senior civil servants. We can say that paperwork is elevated in two administrations only, that of Kosovo and Serbia, and the supplementing application is almost impossible in practice, and annulment procedures are mostly left without any reason behind it. From the last part of this area, we unfortunately can say that senior civil service is still vulnerable to the political interference. Appointments to act in positions are not limited to civil servants, at least in practice. In the half of the region, governments impede the integrity of senior civil servants. Government working bodies in Montenegro, in Serbia, and heads of bodies in North Macedonia, resulting in largely uncompetitive appointments in senior civil servant positions. Miloš, the floor is for you.
Thanks. Just a couple of observations on the accountability area. So firstly, we ask CSOs how do they feel about the freedom of information legislation and its enforcement in practice. There is some increase in perception in the sense that it became more positive. However, on average, a quarter of them believes that administrations store enough information they produce as a precondition to fulfill this right, which is still quite low. When it comes to perception at least, and that the exceptions defined in the legislation are adequate to things around 1/3. On a more positive side, like before, majority of organizations in the region think that what was requested gets submitted on time. However, important point is that around the quarter, again, 25% of the surveyed civil society representatives believe that the sanctions for those who do not comply are actually effective in practice. Or in other words, they consider it to be futile. On the proactive informing side, practices didn't improve. What we observe over the years is that there are highly uneven practices among authorities within one cycle and between different cycles. And the citizen-friendly approach in putting information online on the websites is still something to be desired. At the moment, fully accessible and updated and complete information are those that are basic in a way, on the contacts, on the organizational structures, or on the scopes of work, while more substantial information such as annual reports or budgetary documentation, significantly less so. Though I have to mention that the observed sample bodies in Montenegro were diligent in publishing annual reports on their work. Lirica, back to you.
Thank you, Miloš. Now I'm back with the area of service delivery. The approach to monitoring these principles by the WeBER team relies firstly on the public perception of the civil service policy, including how receptive the administration is to redesigning the administrative services based on the citizen feedback, and then how this is complemented with civil society's perception of distinct service delivery aspects. From the first part, we can see that the latest public opinion poll from May 2022 shows that citizen satisfaction on services get increasingly favorable. Administrations in Albania, Kosovo, and Serbia are perceived to be forerunning service delivery upscale. Nevertheless, continuing the upward trend, the entire region is scoring very highly on making service provision citizen-focused. Majority of population in the Western Balkans holds that it has become easier to deal with the administration in the past 2 years. 52% of actually answered that, and that less time is needed to obtain services, 53% of that. Finally, that there is a possibility for feedback on services, believes around 45%. We have significant variations in Bosnia and Herzegovina with 27% and in 62% in Serbia. E-services are used more often than 2 years ago, with the usage going up from 39% in 2020 to almost 1/2 in the recent public opinion poll. From the second part of the slides, we can see that online accessibility of information on services has improved in the 2-year time frame. Among fully accessible information on website of our 5 service samples providers are the information on who to contact, fees to be paid, and rights and obligations of the users. We can see that it's still largely accessible pieces of information that are how to description procedures and citizen-friendly guidance, but only in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Montenegro, no user-friendly guidance in any format is available. While least accessible or missing is the difference of prices between in-person and e-services and service data in open format. Milos, the floor is yours.
So finally, we have come to the 6th area, public finance management. We have 3 topics here to cover with this presentation. When it comes to budget transparency at the central level, it has remained moderate. Some of the key budgetary documents, such as the annual laws on the budget or the budget execution reports, annual or during the year, are not necessarily always available, or if available, accessible. One example here is the mid-year budget spending. We have never so far observed such practices, that such mid-year data is published online. We have one exception here, which is for the administration of Kosovo. What is perhaps worth your mention is that the final accounts of the budget tend to contain at least a nuance of performance information on the policy outcomes, and not just the execution data. However, the full performance information was revealed in the annual accounts in this cycle for Albania and Serbia. And I would just like to stress that citizen budgets are becoming a regular practice in the region over time. When it comes to public procurement information that is available to the public, we mostly look at the central level bodies and the ministries as a big contracting authorities. Central procurement authorities and review bodies tend to regularly publish their annual reports online, reporting on the annual procurement activity within the state and the protection of bidders' rights. And what is also promising is that the public procurement portals in the region are containing mainly user-friendly features. The downside here is on the part of the ministries, as I mentioned. And since the majority of them publish their annual procurement plans, this practice was not observed when it comes to publishing procurement reports on the annual basis, with the exception of the Montenegro, yes. However, Montenegro is another exception here, in that more than 15% of the procurement procedures that are completed annually are done via procedures that are not open or competitive. Finally, a couple of thoughts on the Supreme Audit Institution's communication and engagement with the public. This is one of the most positively assessed area of intervention over the years. All sides in the region have developed communication strategies and dedicated at least one job position for communication, proactive communication with the stakeholders and with the public. And what is also noteworthy is that audit reports get increasingly summarized and therefore reader-friendlier. We have example of 3 sides inviting citizens to suggest audit topics online, whereas State Audit Office in North Macedonia and audit of institutions in B&H. I regularly consult CSOs in planning annual audit activity, which puts these two institutions at the forefront in the region. So without further ado, just a couple of key messages. In the end, I'm not going to read through them, maybe to just show them for a couple of seconds for you to read and maybe as a food for discussion. So there is a best performance overall in service delivery and public finance management over the years. It seems that underperformance in some other critical areas of power does not affect the citizen perception of service delivery. Is this a contradiction or not? It is something to be discussed, but as I said, even in these two areas, there are aspects that can be significantly improved. On the other hand, transparency and openness of policy development, taking strategic framework into account, is still, it perceives at least not genuine, except for the good examples that we have in the development of strategic framework. Policy development is mostly inconsequential, and decision-making is under discretion. It seems that regaining trust in the consultative processes before formalities should be a priority. When it comes to transparency of civil service, it is not increasing. Whether there is a fear of misinterpretation if the data gets public, or belief that the public is disinterested in technicalities such as how many work administration, which position, what are the salaries, etc., is again something to discuss. And the civil service remains vulnerable to political considerations. Finally, in the area of access to public documents, after 3 cycles, it is evident then there is no firm standard when it comes to proactive informing, or if there is, it is not adhered to. And CSOs in their with their regular participation in the survey inform us that freedom of information right is not something that should be taken for granted, but that there is a constant need to protect this right. This is it. Thank you once again to Lyrica, to all the team members for our teamwork.
Thank you, Milos. Thank you, Lyrica. Thank you for showing all this data in quite comprehensible way. Well, I know it was quite demanding to collect them. As I said earlier, we heard the view, we heard what WeBER is about, what methodology follows. We heard also some citizens' concerns from the audience when interacting with the public institutions. And now is the turn to also see the perspective of the institutions of what we just heard, and also maybe reflect on some of the citizens' concerns. So in this panel, we will be discussing with Mr. Ivan Lazarevic, coordinator of IPA coordinator and coordinator of international affairs in the Ministry of Public Administration in Podgorica, with Mr. Dragan Čuzulan, Public Administration Reform Coordinator in Sarajevo, and with Mrs. Laura Aidini, Advisor to the Minister for Public Administration in Skopje. So I will start with Mr. Ivan. This is a first question that I will pose to all of you. So from what we just heard and from what you have seen from our monitoring reports, I would like to ask what of the recommendations have you taken into account into the previous cycles, or do you take into account from what you just see when you're designing the policies? So please.
So first of all, thank you for inviting me here to participate. It's really a pleasure and honor. Before answering anything, I have to just point out that Montenegro has been in a relatively complex political situation since 2020. Why I'm saying this is that we started drafting PAR strategy with 41st government. Then we had elections in August. Then we had 42nd government, which again continued drafting the strategy, PAR strategy. And then we have 43rd government in 2022 that is implementing actually what previous 2 governments foreseen. So let's try to answer your question like this. So we started the analysis of the state of play of the previous strategy in 2020 by establishing working groups that are dealing with local, state level of service and also digitalization. So we had three areas of intervention. When the new government, 42nd, started, they decided to change the concept. So they decided that whole strategy will not be divided in local and central level, but the activities and the objectives that are valid for the central level are also valid for the local level. And that changed in December 2020. At that time, we decided to change the scope, the work of the working group, and included all the relevant institutions in the government of Montenegro, but we didn't stop there. We decided to include also civil society members, also academia, etc., etc. At that time, we had assistance from various institutions, including Sigma, UNDP, delegation, European Commission, and also we invited RESPA to participate in our working meetings. Why I'm saying all of this is that what I've seen from the findings, which I'm looking forward to read, is that most of the indicators we already have from Sigma, as Gregor Virant already said. So in that sense, yes, we included them in the strategy, and we try to see what we did wrong with the previous strategy and improve it with this one. We can discuss later on what are those details, but yes, we are trying to include all the inputs we have from all the relevant stakeholders. Why I'm saying this is, and I will stop after this, is that we are quite proud, which is also reflected here, of our process of drafting the PAR strategy, and later on I can discuss a little bit more if you allow me.
Thank you. Mr. Dragan, the same question to you. What have you taken into consideration from this monitoring reports?
Hvala na pitanju. Pozdrav sa moje strane. Dakle, ako govorimo o strategiji reforme javne uprave i akcionom planu za period 2018-2022, oni su produženi do 2027. Iako su pisani tokom 2016. i 2017. Usvojeni su dakle sa zakašnjenjem od 2 godine. Ono što je možda karakteristika kompleksnog političkog sistema u Bosni i Hercegovini jeste da se sve ove odluke i strategije donose na 4 upravna nivoa i da onda moramo imati proceduru usvajanja vlada ili već kako se to na pojedinom nivou zovu, dakle odgovarajućih političkih tijela koje treba da usvoje i strateški okvir i akcioni plan. Dakle, govorimo o periodu kad prije nego je usvojen monitoring izvještaj. Organizacije civilnog društva, nažalost, nisu bili uključeni u rad radne grupe, kao što se i kaže u izvještaju, za razvoj strategije za reformu javne uprave. Međutim, Ured koordinatora za reformu javne uprave u BiH, koji ja vodim, je napravio određeni napor da ipak uključi zainteresovane organizacije civilnog društva izvan procesa formalnih konsultacija kako bi čuli njihovo mišljenje i komentare. Inače, Parko ili Ured za reformu javne uprave predviđa učešće OSCE, ali samo za proces javnih konsultacija kao što je razvoj strategije i akcionog plana, tokom kojih OECD mogu iznijeti prijedloge, komentare i sugestije na konačni dokument. Tokom pripreme akcionog plana za period 21-23. organizacije civilnog društva su konsultovane u početku izrade dokumenta, a u javne konsultacije su bili uključeni predstavnici organizacija civilnog društva, akademske zajednice i poslovne zajednice. Evo, možda toliko za sada, ako bude još pitanja.
Thank you. Yes, and Laura?
Thank you, Ardit. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for giving us opportunity also to hear our voices, institutional, governmental one. It's very good to have this kind of conferences, meetings to say in future, to exchange the experience with each other, and to work closer. Maybe it's going to be better. Having in mind that in our country we are at the last year of implementing our action plan of PAR strategy 2018-2022, we have in account all the international reports regarding here the European Commission report for North Macedonia 2021-22, the report of the monitoring carried out by Sigma for year 2021, also as well the conclusions for the 11th meeting of the PAR special group that we have in North Macedonia. But all the others reports, and including the WeBER, that is very important for our country. We have listened the previous speakers for these reports, and many of these recommendations we are now planning to include in the new PAR strategy that we are writing. As a part, like I started, and I'm telling that we are now preparing the new strategy that is 2330 strategy about 8-year. We call like 8-year because we are also including some of the recommendations and activities that are we didn't achieve to implement with this previous strategy. We are including more civil societies. And one of the recommendations of the WeBER that we emphasize like an institution, like a ministry that is in charge for public administration reform and for this kind of strategy, that we don't include the civil societies in our processes in the manner they should be included even in the decision making. Having in mind that in our structure of the PAR strategy, we have team of PAR that is within MISA, and they are doing coordinating and the monitoring of the PAR. So we are preparing the reports for the citizens and for the government of implementing our activities in PAR strategy. We have the secretariat of PAR that is in the professional level and technical one, and we have the PAR council at the political level that are the government and the ministries within this group. So we now, like we started writing the new PAR strategy, we are intensively want to, and we include in the part of the writing the new strategy, so from the beginning to work together and from the establishing of the new activity, but also we are thinking about now in the phase in analysis that even we are going to take this structure furthermore, or we are going to make some changes, civil societies to be part of this structure in the professional level maybe, and technical, and why not in the political level when they can take together with government the decision as the regard of the activities.
Maybe if I can just jump in with a follow-up question, because you explained that you include the civil society and you take into account. Do you inform them, or how do you ensure that their input is taken into account and they're satisfied with what you have taken into account? I mean, do you inform them at the end that you will take this piece into account and this not, and for what reason?
Learning from the previous years that we didn't do well in this manner, we are now trying to have a plenary session when together civil society are part of this working group in subgroups regarding to their professional backgrounds that can give inputs in the writing the new strategy. So for this reason, afterwards we are going to have this kind of plenary session together, also with the sectorial group that we have with the civil societies, making presentation for our achievement, but also taking account of their recommendations and activities that they are proposal to see and to find themselves where they are included in our activities that are planned in the new strategy.
Thank you, Laura. Ivan, because Montenegro is often used as a best example when it comes to consultations with the civil society, can you tell us what is the key to the success that the others, I mean, we are trying to show it as a good model to replicate in the region?
Okay, I will also try to answer the question you posed to Laura as well. So maybe we are lucky, but our civil society organizations are quite proactive. For example, the representative from CSO in our working group for Paris was quite active. So we tried to include all the, as I said, all the relevant stakeholders from the beginning. But we had luck that our representative was heard as well, because he's quite, as I said, knowledgeable and active. So we heard what he was saying as a representative of CSO and tried to include as much as possible in the strategy. But it's not only CSOs that we used as a source of ideas. That's what I wanted to share here with you, and it is reflected here, and thank you. So we tried to change the process of drafting this document since the beginning. Even though it was a complex situation in Montenegro, we decided to involve as much as possible all the sides to hear what was the problems they recognize, what can we do as a government to assist in changing those and improving those problems, or not improving problems, but solving problems, I'm sorry. So we started by organizing focus groups where we gathered all relevant areas of life, including public administration itself. So we had a number of ideas that came from those focus groups. We had 8 of them, I think, 6 or 8 of them, and we actually used the quotes from focus groups as banners on all our meetings and all our workshops that we had for the strategy. And that was the starting point to see how those problems can be resolved. So besides the focus groups, we organized workshops, I think 3 of 2-day workshops for around 60 participants per workshop. Also, representatives of CSO were attending and being quite proactive at the meetings. So we had a number of meetings with the donors, with Sigma, with UNDP. UNDP assist us in organizing these workshops, I have to say that. So we had meetings of working group, a number of meetings throughout the year. And we had, as usual, that is according to our legislation, legal framework that we have for public consultations. We organized a public debate that lasted for I think 40 days. At the end of the public debate, we again had a round table where we invite all the relevant stakeholders to discuss the, let's say, final version of the document. And in December, I think it was the last session of the government for the year, we adopted the power strategy in 2021. So yes, we are trying. What is the secret? I don't know, to be honest. It's just that we try to open the process of drafting to all interested parties. CSOs recognize the importance to be there.
And the proactivity, I would say, that you mentioned, it's quite important then.
We were lucky, maybe it's on the side of CSOs, not us. So maybe that's the secret.
Mr. Dragan, so what about the availability of the reporting, of the reports from the consultations? How can we improve, or how can you improve that in Bosnia? From the result that we saw, I mean, the situation is not very perfect, so what to do?
Pa, vidite, dakle, vrlo je korisno čuti ove dobra iskustva i primjere koji su uvijek, da kažem, motivacioni za sve nas u regionu i dobro je da vidimo kako to negdje dobro funkcioniše ili bolje ili lošije. Dakle, ja ću reći izvještaj, dakle, Evropske komisije za BiH, standardno govori o jednom ograničenom napretku, ranoj fazi reforme javne uprave i ta stagnacija ipak traje godinama. Ako uzme u obzir da, recimo, državna služba nije oslobođena političkog utjecaja, da nema želje za depolitizaciju javne uprave i da se donose ili izmjene zakona o državnoj službi koje bi prednost dali zapošljavanju sposobnih, a ne podobnih. Još uvijek, na primjer, nemamo, rekao sam, dakle, pored strategije koja jeste produžena do 27. Nalazimo se u koracima implementacije kada nije još uvijek određeno političko tijelo koje treba da vodi proces reforme javne uprave, a on je u svakoj državi uvijek važno tijelo. Dakle, treba donijeti platformu o zajedničkom djelovanju, jedan dokument koji bi bio za sve nivoje vlasti i sve vlade i koordinacijni odbor kao političko tijelo koje bi vodilo reformu javne uprave. Možda neki ne znaju, ali u Bosni i Hercegovini smo imali fond za reformu javne uprave u koji su sredstva davali međunarodni donatori i to je bila izuzetno dobra, rekao bih, praksa, ali je fond političkim motivima blokiran od 2017. i mi tu recimo imamo nekih 10 miliona raspoloživih sredstava koja još uvijek ne koristimo. Dakle, već 5 godina traje ta blokada fonda. Mi smo svojevremeno u regionu, kada smo govorili o fondu reforme javne uprave, to navodili kao jednu od dobrih praksi koje su i drugi htjeli da preuzimaju, ali evo, nažalost, mi smo je uspjeli pokvariti u Bosni i Hercegovini. Dakle, kad govorimo o ovoj saradnji sa civilnom sektorom i ovim iskustvima iz Crne Gore, ja ću reći da, iako nismo imali saglasnost predstavnika zajedničke radne grupe za izradu strategije da se civilno društvo aktivnije uključi, mi smo provodili naknadne konsultacije sa civilnim društvom i pokušavali da dobijemo konkretne prijedloge šta treba unaprijediti. Često smo u tom mehanizmu koordinacije ostajali usamljeni da podržimo, dakle, ideje civilnog društva, a postoji jedna praksa, jedno iskustvo koje bi rekao kao primjer dobre prakse saradnje sa civilnim društvom. Imali smo dobru saradnju sa nekoliko organizacija, smo radili na draftanju, izradi politike i standarda proaktivne transparentnosti. Definisali smo set 38 informacija koje trebaju građanima institucije da daju u formi otvorenih podataka na svojim web stranicama i to ključno političko tijelo u Bosni i Hercegovini, Vijeće ministara na nivou države, je usvojilo politiku i standarde 38, dakle, standarda koje smo mi na neki način uspjeli da nametnemo za državni nivo institucija. Ostali nivoji se nisu uključivali, niži nivoji, ali bih rekao da se radi o jednom primjeru koji se može izdvojiti kao pozitivan. Dakle, u kontekstu ove priče oko otvorenosti podataka prema građanima. Evo, toliko.
Thank you. Laura, we just heard also in the address of Mr. Dragan that there is no willingness for depolitization of the administration. This is a concern present in all of the countries. So what kind of measures do you take for depolitization of the public administration?
Yeah, it's difficult to change the culture, organizational, to say, of the government and the way we are learned to work in our daily job. But I think that we are efforting and making efforts too much to depoliticize the administration. Also in our reports regarding to the second priority, civil, where is the human resources management service, we are getting to improve ourselves. So we in Macedonia, in North Macedonia, we had a law that is called top management service, that it should make a distinction between the politicians and the professionals in the positions that are in the senior level. This law was in the parliament. We withdraw this law back to our work, to work in this law regarding to the two laws that we are preparing, parallel, law on administrative servant and law on public sector employees. Those three laws, like I said, they should exclude the political influence in the processes and the professionalization and depolitization of the administration. So because of consideration with these two laws, we are working in some of the segments in this law. So in future, after we start implementing this law, we think that in deep we'll change the political influence in the institutions, because most of the professionals we are going to have in the place leading with the institutions.
Just to jump in with a follow-up question, sometimes it says that the problem is not within the laws. The laws are good, but the implementation is the problem. And at the employment, sometimes we see as a data that says the human effect has an influence on to disregard basically the merit-based criteria for employment. So maybe in this sense, what kind of measures have you taken to also deal with this human element in order to ensure that the merit-based criteria in employments are ensured?
Having in mind in the law on administrative servants, because we are regulating this process of merit-based recruitment in this law, we are improving ourselves. Like I said, we have new laws. We have a public consultation previous week with the minister and all stakeholders in our country. Preparing this law were included the broader stakeholders, also the institution, the professionals, just to avoid this kind of influence of the humans, to say, in this kind of processes. We make more of the things in the electronic way. I mean, passing the exams. We are trying to ourselves, okay, in this manner. But also, what is important that until now we didn't have any kind of recruitment process for the top management or senior level. So now we have this law, but we should give the chance to improve and to see the implementation of this kind of law, so to see how we are going to exclude all the political influence in the future.
Thank you, Laura. Now going back to Ivan, because you were mentioned as a good example, I want to ask, what are the lessons learned from COVID and how the institution and administration work during COVID pandemic? What were the challenges, and if there were stagnation, where were they, and what could have been done better?
Okay, so maybe here we are not such a good example, since we are under cyber attacks since August. So digitalization is pretty much on hold until we defend ourselves and start to move forward. But I understood that we are not alone. Here the whole region was affected as well. So what COVID showed us, actually, there is a few things. So it showed us first that we can work from home, some of us at least, and showed us the importance of having good information systems within the government. Not only good, but also secure and accessible, which is not always easy to achieve, since accessibility and security don't go quite together well. So what we did is we tried to, since we have EDMS, or electronic document management system within the government, that was the first obstacle, how to approach the system outside of the government network, since it's closed in the government network, so that is accessibility that we needed. And for some areas it helped, because we can work and provide services to the citizens seamlessly, let's say. But on the other hand, what we saw as a problem is, for example, our agency for personal data protection and free access to information doesn't have that EDMS, and it has to respond to a number of appeals for the actually free access to information requests not being answered. So here we saw a problem, because the data from the reports showed that the appeals, the number of appeals increased very much during the COVID area. So COVID showed us that we have to have information systems that are reliable, that are secure, and that are at least some way accessible to the civil servants that are working from home. What we did also in the COVID area, it showed us again the importance of digitalization. Of course, we recognize that in all our strategic documents, not only in part strategy for the e-government part of digitalization, but also the digital transformation strategy, which we adopted also last year, the importance of having good data, having registries that communicate between themselves, and having all the small building blocks that will lead us to having an e-government, good e-government in the system. So what we are trying to do is to increase the number of services. I know that we are quite low there in comparison to some of the countries. But what we did is that we are trying to recognize now with assistance from UNDP that's actually funded by EU from the remaining part of sector budget support. Sorry for this complicated sentence, but it's like that. So what we are trying to do is to define these 14 services that are relevant to the citizens and the economy and publish it as soon as possible. But it's not only to have services, you have to have users. So what we recognize is the importance of raising awareness among our citizens to use the services that exist already. So that is recognized in the digital transformation strategy as one of the key activities. And again, I have to come back to RESPA. RESPA is actually helping us in this campaign to organize for whole 3 unofficial regions of Montenegro to promote the importance of e-government services, to promote importance of digital literacy, and also what we are trying to do is, since we introduced the new ID with biometric data and with digital certificate on it, is to the usage and penetration of usage of new ID.
Thank you, Ivan. Dragan, I just want also to give opportunity also to the public and to our online audience to pose questions, because we are short on time. For the online audience, they can pose questions in writing or to raise a hand, and we will let you in. And for the rest of you, after Dragan's intervention to my other question, please, if you have questions, raise your hand, and the staff will give you the mic. So Dragan, we just heard from Ivan about the importance of the good data. And we also saw in the presentation that there is no progress or slow progress in the open data policy. What is the reason? Is it a threat, or how to improve?
Pa vidite, ja sam dakle pomenuo da smo mi na nivou Savjeta ministara, odnosno Vijeća ministara, donijeli politiku i standarde proaktivne transparentnosti i da smo definisali 38 standarda ili otvorenih podataka koji se obavezno objavljuju na web stranicama institucija. Dakle, istovremeno redovno pratimo i izvještavamo to tijelo o provođenju tih standarda i u kojoj su mjeri svi otvoreni podaci dostupni. Dakle, od primjene svih 38 standarda, od donošenja internih akata u vezi sa dodatnim standardima, poput planova zapošljavanja, dakle, putnih troškova, budžeta za građane, javnih nabavki i tako dalje. Sve ove informacije su, recimo, dostupne na internet stranici naše institucije i par koja je lider u toj oblasti u Bosni i Hercegovini. Naravno, kada govorimo o pitanju, u kontekstu pitanja u kojem smo prethodno razgovarali, o čemu je koleginica nešto rekla, ja bih rekao da jeste zaista ključno pitanje depolitizacija reforme javne uprave i možda bih izdvojio da je tokom 20. i 21. u Bosni i Hercegovini preduzeto kroz IPA projekat koji je dao podršku tom procesu, dosta toga na unapređenju i profesionalizaciji sistema državne službe. Dakle, prema Sigma izvještaju iz 2022. došlo je do određenog napretka u toj oblasti, ali naravno, rekao sam, postoji dosta problema i otpora depolitizaciji. Dakle, strateški okvir za reformu javne uprave, koji je sada produžen do 27. daje dobar okvir za reformu državne službe. Na nivou institucija zakonom je zagarantovano zapošljavanje na osnovu zasluga, kako je i predviđeno principom meritornosti. Komisije za izbor državnih službenika su oslobođene političkog uticaja i u Bosni i Hercegovini ih imenuje Agencija za državnu službu. Na ostalim nivoima, međutim, to još uvijek nije slučaj i mi radimo na tome da se zajedno sa Sigmom ti zakoni primijene i na ostalim nivoima vlasti. Pored toga planiramo povećati primjenu IT alata u procesu zapošljavanja kako bi ono bilo što nepristrasnije i objektivnije. To podrazumijeva online testiranje, onemogućavanje manipulacija sa ispitnim pitanjima, ocjenjivanje na osnovu anonimnih, šifrovanih prijava i slično. Dakle, dodatno očekujemo da se uvođenje ocjene kompetencije u proces zapošljavanja u cijeloj državi i profesionalizacija i obuke članova komisija koje će doprinijeti izboru najboljih kandidata, jednostavno time podigne i da dobijemo ukupni kvalitet rada, da podignemo ukupni kvalitet rada u javnom sektoru.
Thank you, Dragan. Do we have questions from the audience here and online? Yes, on the back.
Ja ću na srpskom. Dobar dan, Aca Vukalović. Kratko pitanje. Za teme o kojima ste govorili, da li su u vašim državama javno informisanje, da kažem mediji koji pokrivaju celu državu, najavljivali, pratili i informisali o ovim stvarima koje se događaju u upravi? Hvala.
Okay, thank you for the question. Maybe I can collect another one. If not, who would like to comment on communication with the media? Yes, Ivan.
2 sentences. Yes, the shortest answer is yes, but not only that. We use all other medias to communicate, or other channels to communicate with the citizens and the economy. So not only national covered media operator, but also Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, Twitter, I don't know, all the social networks that existed that are existing and that we are using. So yes, at least the part of public events, in the sense of roundtables or public debates, yes, they are covered in the national media, but also in the printed papers. But main communication channel for us is again now remaining the social media. Sorry.
Thank you. I will follow up with Laura on
the question.
You can comment on media, but I want to go back because North Macedonia is a good example on the open data policy. Okay. What is the lesson learned? Are there any headaches from this open data policy?
Yes, of course. I will previously to answer to give some answer in a manner of this question for the media. What is very important, like a government to do, because more we are going with the PR and telling to the government and citizens what our ministers are doing, or not telling too much for our works. And this is, I mean, the media should have a good role in the trust of the public administration versus the citizens. So what we should do, like a government, I think, especially for North Macedonia, I'm going to talk, we should focus more on the communication plans. So we should do some communication plans with the citizens rather than PR, to see that the citizens, our work, not having this pressure, the perception that they have now for the government. So most of them are thinking that we are not doing, and we have some tweets in the contra of the work that we do, like administration is more not doing the job, but we should improve ourselves more and to tell the citizens and to communicate more our work, what we do. As the manner of the open data, we are good, yes, but we should improve, like for everything. Like a government that we do well, we should improve more and more, just to be closer to the citizens and to be more open for the citizens. And only I will share with you some data regarding that we are talking some statistic for the open data. As of October 2022, we have 573 data sets from 74 public sector institutions have been published on the open data portal. Portal is this kind of portal we are handling like a ministry, and we are responsible. Rather than technical, also we train the institutions to how to open this kind of data and how to be closer to the citizen. Additionally, in the direction of advancing skills, like I said, we develop some trainings for trainers with the experts from Open Data Institute from Great Britain. So, also connecting with the question with the media, how open we are like a government, we are closer to the citizens and to improve our selves regarding to the data that can make analysis other organizations, civil societies, and to give us recommendations, because these kind of reports are very objective and it can be useful for us to improve ourselves in future.
Thank you, Laura. Because we are quite on time, but I will use 2 minutes because we started 2 minutes late. Do we have an online questioners? Okay, my last questions would be from what we just heard to Mr. Dragan. Again, because we've seen in the report and we've heard that the worst aspect of public informing is regarding the institution's budget. Why is this so?
Pa vidite, da vam kažem, dakle, vjerujem da vam je poznato da u Bosni i Hercegovini već 2 godine nije bio usvojen budžet i mi smo funkcionisali na privremenom finansiranju. Državne institucije su, mislim, generalno govoreći, karakteristika političkih odnosa i funkcionisanja u Bosni i Hercegovini je u zadnjem periodu zaista bila vrlo kompleksna i ne samo zbog kompleksnosti uređenja i sistema, nego zbog načina vođenja politika. Pa smo imali, ne znam, različite oblike blokada, namjernih političkih obstrukcija, kašnjenje u donošenju odluka. Dakle, jednostavno izostajalo je političko vođenje procesa reformi, tako i vezano pitanja za financije i za budžet. Državne institucije su, dakle, od početka 22. funkcionisale na odlukama o privremenom finansiranju i budžet je usvojen recimo za 22. tek krajem juna 22. Ja bih rekao da najjači otpor dolazi iz mentaliteta vlasti i još uvijek nedovoljnog pritiska javnosti da se budžeti posmatraju kao javno dobro od opšteg interesa, ovo o čemu smo malo prije razgovarali kada smo pričali oko otvorenih podataka. I nažalost, još uvijek se budžeti posmatraju kao plijen političkih stranaka na vlasti. I to treba otvoreno da se kaže. Dakle, ta vrsta političkog mentaliteta je jednostavno preduslov za promjenu takvog stanja. Nedostaje jača zakonska obaveza za transparentnu objavu podataka i svih finansijskih podataka i odgovornost donosioca odluka. Dakle, i kada je u pitanju, recimo, i zakon o slobodi pristupa informacijama, mi već nekoliko godina od Ministarstva pravde očekujemo da iz fioke izvadi taj zakon i da ga predloži i stavi na usvajanje, koji bi definisao obavezu objave javnih podataka za sve institucije. A vidjeli ste u posljednje vrijeme da je i fokus Evropske komisije kada je u pitanju Bosna i Hercegovina i jedan od uslova za dobijanje kandidatskog statusa su bili 3 zakona. Sva 3 stoje u Ministarstvu pravde, Zakon o Visokom sudskom tužilačkom vijeću, Zakon o javnim nabavkama i Zakon o sukobu interesa. I, nažalost, činjenica je da nekih 300 državnih službenika koji su u sukobu interesa preko svojih političkih stranaka koče taj zakon. To su politički nonsensi, ali i činjenice. I stvari koje zaista moraju da se promijene. Dakle, cijeli sistem reformi stoji radi, rekao bih tako, tih interesnih grupa koje jednostavno ne dozvoljavaju da se ide napred.
Thank you, Dragan. And now I have to also close the panel because our Sigma expert is waiting. And I want to use this opportunity to thank you also for the honesty on what is missing and how to proceed and how to do better. Thank you also to TEN for the wonderful conference. Thank you.
Many thanks to our panelists and their contribution. I would now like to announce the presentation of the Sigma Data Portal and the Policy Simulator that will be given by Mr. Jesper Johnson, Senior Policy Analyst, who is joining us online. Can you hear us? The floor is yours.
I can hear you. Sorry, I can hear you, and thank you. Thank you very much. And what I wanted to do today was to give you some more material, some more data that you could, and yet has discovered that Sigma for the first time has actually published all its monitoring work, all its data on a public portal, and I wanted to make sure that you definitely knew about that, because that is one of the core purposes of this portal, is to make sure that the data is used by civil society organizations, by citizens, by decision makers. We're also planning to launch a competition for academic researchers to actually make use of this data to influence policy in the Western Balkans. So my name is Jesper Johnson. I'm the team leader at Sigma for the monitoring work stream that we have, Sigma. I'm sure many of you know it's a joint initiative of the OECD and the EU. And we've been doing evaluation or monitoring work for a long time, but as I said, this is the first time that we actually, we've always published reports, but now we've done a portal with data. So let me show this to you very briefly. This is a very short session, so I will not be able to show you everything. But yes, in 15 minutes, the basics of what we have. Let me share that with you. So if you, for those that are in the chat, I will share the link. For those that, of course, most of you are present physically. If you want to find it, you can go to Google, write PAR-portal. You can write Sigma, SIGMA, and you should get the link to this portal. You can also find it on the Sigma website, going to the monitoring tab, but it should be otherwise fairly easy to find. So, okay, it looks like this. So basically we have the basic country entries, thematic entries, meaning the different indicators. I'm really eager to show you the simulator, which is a new addition to the portal that we worked on, which actually enables everyone to go in and play with the data and simulate policy reform. What effects would they have? Are they for good or for worse? A little explanation about the methodology that we use, and then a link to the main Sigma website. So the core of it is this radar here. It gives you the bird's eye view, the full picture of both the structure that we work from, the principles of public administration, but also the data in a nutshell. And you can see it would load automatically on the country where you are, and you can maneuver through this radar to explore the many data points that we have. A nice point of departure is to pick the Western Balkans average, and then you can pick a particular country. We can also pick our time series, so look at the trends from 2017 to 2021. And then you can see for each of the 52 composite indicators, as shown, this is the very bird's eye view. For each of the 52 indicators, what the situation is, and if the blue line, sorry, not blue, green line is above the dotted area, it means progress. If it's below, it means regress. And in general, there's been more progress than regress. But of course, as always, what data is good at showing is that it's really very varied. So you have some areas, public procurement, external audit, that really improved a lot. You have other areas, strategic framework of public administration reform, for example, where we saw a lot of regress over that period. So I will get back to the radar. I just want to show you, we have another view of this. Basically, it shows the numbers in a table format, and you can click here and you can show the progress, and you can see here that for all the areas except strategic framework, we've seen actually progress over the period. You can filter the table, so you're most interested in service delivery. Okay. So how does that look? We see a lot of progress in Serbia, Albania. We see no progress in Kosovo and other countries. Then we will, maybe we don't want to see just the progress. We want to see the absolute values. So at Sigma, we have a value from at the highest level from 0 to 5. So 5 being the best. So this is let's say the area averages, which shows you the overall performance in public administration across the Western Balkan countries and across the 6 areas. So that you can play around with yourself. If you're from North Macedonia, say, okay, we're really good in service delivery. We should probably look more into improving reforms on policy development and coordination, etc., etc. Okay, then we picked up a few highlights down here. Some key data that we think tell a story and that we think are really important for decision makers. This is a positive one. It shows that the women in the senior civil service positions is actually quite good compared to EU and OECD figures, and that it has been improving since the last monitoring round, 2017. So the data is from 2016. Yeah, and you can compare, of course, the different countries. You can even select the different values here, and it goes on. There's too much. This is about basically the length of court cases. This is about the number of eligible candidates per vacancy. So about recruitment. So how effective are recruitments? This is about the share of laws amended 1 year after adoption. So it shows a lot about regulatory stability. This is a bit, again, about parliament data or legislative data. We see some countries have very high use of extraordinary procedure to adopt laws, which circumvents the ability of both MPs but also citizens to really influence the policymaking process, and potentially is a risk of capture, policy capture. A lot of different data here that I would encourage you all to really explore yourself. Then when you go down, you have different entries by country. And basically what that does is that it preloads that radar I showed you in the beginning. It preloads that on a particular country. And here it does the same. It just, if it's a particular thematic area you're interested in, well, you will go here and you will say, I'm very interested in accountability. The radar is then preloaded on these 5 indicators we have here. Access to information, for example. Okay, so we can dive even further down. We can see what are the sub-indicators that we have for this composite. First, we assess the law on access to information. Then we assess the institutional setup. Then we assess whether information is actually disclosed in practice. So one is about whether ministry websites and government agencies disclose some very basic data sets. The next one is about some key central data sets and whether they are actually disclosed. And then the last 2 ones are survey-based indicators. One is a citizen survey and the other is a business survey. So this is about perceptions. It is about the satisfaction of citizens and businesses with information provision. And again, you can compare trends, individual countries, or just a regional average, and you can see basically whether there's been any positive or negative developments. Even from here, and you can see, for example, in the Western Balkans, the law on access to information is actually quite good. When we dive down into what we call the checklist, we can see that most of these, what we would consider good criteria to be fulfilled for what a law should contain, are fulfilled. There are only a few cases where laws could become even more perfect. Again, here you can change to different countries and change to different years. Okay, but we also have some more, some other interesting types of data that basically show you, for example, here. Yeah, so we want to see how businesses think about the level of access to information. You get a little bit of information about the methodology here, and you can see the raw data down here. Okay, so the basic point being that this radar is interactive, so you can dive down through the levels and dive down into the deepest levels of the data and see even the quality of an individual law or the satisfaction of particular citizens as we move through. Okay, the simulator does the same, except it allows you to play around with the values. So you can, again, maneuver through these 6 areas and the different countries. But now I want to try and simulate what, for example, an effect it would have to improve my public information law or improve the institutional framework. What would it take to actually improve? Let's take the same example, access to information. Okay, so we can see here that now I'm on Albania. Okay, so here we actually have a perfect law on access to information. But we can see here that there's room for improvement compared to the regional average on what we call key functions on access to information. It's the institutional setup here. Okay, so I can click here. I can see which are the criteria that are not ticked. Okay, for example, statistical data on requests are not published by the relevant body. If that is done, okay, I can simulate. I can actually myself be the assessor and say, I'm gonna do all of this, and whoop, the line fills, and suddenly the indicator value up here, you can see +3, improves. Okay, and I can move further down. I can see, okay, we want to publish more data on our web pages. I'm the minister, I have the power, I make a decree. And we say this goes up to 100%, which it should be. Okay, so I'm actually simulating the changes now, and I can see we're moving from a 3 to a 4 in the indicator rating, and we can go back up here, and we can see a little dent in the overall indicator on the area average here. So this is how it works, and you can do it from home. Okay, I will go back to the main page. I think we have a little bit of time left. The main essence was just to kind of get you acquainted with the site, and then hope that there will be a lot of uptake from you, and you're very happy to write to us if there's any functionalities that you think needs improvement, any data you think there should be, etc. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Do we have any questions from the audience? If not, I would like to thank Mr. Johnson for his presentation. I'm sure that our participants will find this data portal very useful. I would like to announce the lunch break of the first day of the conference. Lunch will be served until 2:30 at the hotel restaurant located on the ground floor across the reception desk. After the lunch break, we will continue to work until the end of the first day in breakout session format. Breakout sessions after the lunch break from 2:30 until 3:45 will be held as following. Session A, Par Strategic Framework at M1 venue. Session B, Policy Development and Coordination at M4 venue on the second floor. Session C, Public Service and Human Resource Management here at M2 venue. Breakout sessions starting from 4 o'clock until 5:15 will be held as following. Session D, Accountability here at M2 venue. Session E, Service Delivery at M4 venue on the second floor. Session F, Public Finance Management at M1 venue. Names of the breakout sessions will be stated in front of each venue. Thank you all, and enjoy the lunch.